Lorraine Cox was a 32-year-old woman living in Exeter, UK. She is dating a man named Ellie who lives in Scotland. Although the distance between them is quite long, they have gotten used to it. At first, they only met on weekends and talked, but gradually their feelings for each other grew deeper. By 2020, they had been in contact in this way for 2 years. Despite the challenges of the distance, they decided to get engaged. Now, they are building a future together and preparing for their wedding. Lorraine is also planning to have their first child. However, in early 2020, their plans had to change for several reasons. By February, Lorraine had moved to Scotland to be with Ellie, where she obtained a temporary visa, and they spent considerable time together. When summer arrived, she wanted to return to Exeter to visit her family and friends for a month or two. This trip was not a breakup, she simply missed her loved ones. Afterward, she intended to return to Scotland and continue strengthening their relationship. Although restrictions in the UK remained strict, they were gradually relaxing, allowing public events to resume and many establishments to reopen. People eagerly took to the streets to socialize again, and Lorraine was no exception. On September 1, 2020, she arrived at her father's house in Exeter, excited to reconnect with friends. They spent the evening visiting several bars, enjoying drinks and good company, until they realized it was time to go home. Everyone left in a good mood. On September 2nd, Lorraine posted an unusual message on social media, claiming she was going to leave the country. This surprised everyone, as her only previous move had been to Scotland, and she had no plans to relocate again. She had just arrived to visit her father and intended to stay for at least a month. This sudden change in her mood and plans seemed out of character. In her post, Lorraine mentioned wanting to move about 50 kilometers from her father's house to a place called Plymouth, which she described as the first stop on her planned journey. This behavior was shocking because Lorraine was not known for making impulsive decisions, especially on such a significant scale. She had a stable life and a loving relationship in Scotland and had never mentioned wanting to move elsewhere. Now, she was considering a move toward France. Unsurprisingly, this post had a deep impact on Ellie. They had a strong relationship, making his fear of losing her understandable. Lorraine's friends bombarded her with questions. Initially, she responded willingly, but as the conversation progressed, her tone changed and mistrust grew. Those who knew her well noticed shifts in her writing style. She began using unfamiliar emojis, making odd mistakes, and her messages conveyed a sense of hostility. This worried her loved ones, as she had always maintained positive relationships with them, and there was no reason for her to display such aggression or undergo drastic life changes. Her father, Tony, who was hosting her during this time, even showed a family friend her old messages alongside the new ones. He pointed out clear inconsistencies in her writing style. Even those who didn't know her well noticed something was off. Throughout this time, Lorraine's boyfriend, who was named Ellie, was especially concerned and tried to understand her behavior. Initially, she responded to him with short, cold replies, but eventually, her answers became even more abrupt. The conversation ended when Lorraine sent him an emoji of a middle finger. This intensified the suspicion that someone else was using her account. Ellie had known Lorraine for 2 years, so the idea that the trip was related to a breakup or conflict seemed unlikely. They valued each other, which made her odd responses even more perplexing. Unfortunately, because of the distance, her boyfriend felt helpless and unable to intervene. A situation arose concerning Tony, Lorraine's father. Determined to discover the truth, he faced a challenge because he was away at the time and couldn't check his daughter's room for clues. Instead, he began speaking to Lorraine's friends, particularly those who had been with her the day before her sudden move to Plymouth. He was scheduled to return home the next day. Upon arriving home, Tony's first action was to go to Lorraine's room, where his suspicions grew stronger. He had already spoken with her close friends, and they all confirmed that no one had seen Lorraine since their breakup at the bar when everyone had left for the night. Inside Lorraine's room, it appeared as though she had never returned after her outing with friends. Her belongings from Scotland remained untouched, and nothing was missing from her room. It looked as if she had left for an extended trip without taking any of her things, which seemed impossible. The most alarming discovery was the bag she had left behind. Lorraine had diabetes and always carried a first aid kit to monitor her blood sugar levels. Her health depended on these supplies, and she never went anywhere, even for a quick trip to the store, without them. For outings like the one to the bar, she typically used a smaller bag. The fact that her larger kit was still in her room raised serious concerns about her recent plans. Tony realized that his daughter had not returned from the party, leading him to fear that something might have happened to her health. The messages she had exchanged with friends and relatives also seemed troubling. Worried, Tony sent another message to Lorraine on social media, expressing concern for her health and asking if she was okay. He warned her that if she did not respond, he would have to contact the police. The message was seen, but he received no reply. After that, Tony's and Lorraine's friends could no longer tolerate the uncertainty and began their search. They started by looking for clues in the bar where they had spent the evening on September 2nd. They interviewed witnesses, distributed flyers, and retraced the presumed route Lorraine would have taken home. It was clear that something alarming must have happened during her journey since she never came home again. Law enforcement and journalists quickly became involved. They were skeptical of the theory that Lorraine might have suffered a health crisis. Detectives believed that if that were the case, she would not have been able to send messages to her friends. Furthermore, several days had passed since her disappearance, and she would likely have been found in a hospital, but tests of recent admissions yielded no results. It appeared far more likely that Lorraine had encountered danger from someone. Journalists rushed to report on the situation, highlighting concerns over Lorraine's disappearance. They recalled that in May 2018, 2 years before Lorraine vanished, an attacker named Robert Proud had attacked a woman who strikingly resembled her. He had abused her but did not kill her, and then evaded capture for a long time. Given his criminal history, it raised fears that there could be more victims. Although he had completed his prison sentence, investigators began considering Lorraine as a potential victim. At the time of her disappearance, Robert was living near the path Lorraine would have taken home. This connection led to his arrest, and police sought to extract a confession from him. They believed he had kidnapped, abused, and possibly killed her, and that he might have disposed of her body. It was suspected that he took her phone and pretended to communicate with her friends and family to buy himself time and create confusion. There was another theory regarding Lorraine's disappearance. Some believed that Robert might have attacked her, but instead of dying, she was hiding to avoid becoming his victim again. The detectives prioritized finding Lorraine because she was clearly in danger. Robert might have been holding her hostage. The situation could have escalated, posing a significant threat. To test this theory, they began reviewing surveillance footage from cameras along Lorraine's potential route that night. Even after narrowing down the time frame, they had about 11,000 hours of footage from over 400 cameras across 120 different locations. Analyzing this footage was time-consuming, but it proved worthwhile, yielding the first clues needed to catch the criminal. Eventually, they spotted a girl who matched Lorraine's description in the recordings. After leaving her friends at the bar, she headed toward her father's house without making any turns. She almost made it home, but a few blocks away, something caught her attention: a kebab shop on the ground floor of an apartment building, which was open at night. Lorraine went inside, likely to grab a snack, and then left to eat on a bench before continuing her way home. Around 2:45 a.m., she returned to the kebab shop, but this time accompanied by an unfamiliar man. This raised alarms because he didn't appear to be just a random passerby. The footage suggested they had interacted, and he had managed to get her attention. The police continued to investigate the recordings and noted that the young man had been following Lorraine after they left the shop. This behavior was concerning, especially since she seemed to be walking voluntarily and the street was deserted. Detectives suspected the man might be a predator who targeted his victim, potentially involved in Lorraine's disappearance and the messages she had sent to her loved ones after the incident. He maintained a distance while following her, trying to remain inconspicuous, and seemed to be assessing the situation. It looked as though he was stalking her, especially since she appeared intoxicated and was stumbling. She had a valuable phone, and with no one accompanying her that night, he saw an opportunity to attack. The police attempted to locate another recording to determine how Lorraine left the building from at least one camera, but were unsuccessful. It appeared she had not exited at all. They spent considerable time reviewing the video footage, only to confirm that Lorraine had not left since she was last seen. The detectives concluded that she might still be inside, possibly being held against her will. Unfortunately, by the time they gathered this information, 8 days had passed. Given this long duration, only a miracle could save Lorraine, who suffered from diabetes. Nevertheless, her family held on to hope. The police obtained a clear photo of the man who accompanied and followed Lorraine that night. They printed it out and began distributing it through the media to attract witnesses. Initially, they visited the kebab shop and spoke with the owner. He informed them that he lived above the shop but had rented the apartment below to a young man about a month ago. This young man had moved in unofficially and was very withdrawn, to the extent that the owner didn't know much about him. The owner even expressed doubts about the young man's name. When police officers visited the apartment, they anticipated finding a crime scene. However, everything was surprisingly neat and clean. The young man living there identified himself as Christopher Mayer and showed them his identification. There was no sign of Lorraine in the apartment, and he allowed the detectives inside without any resistance. They inspected the place thoroughly to ensure that no one was being held against their will. Christopher was then shown a photo of Lorraine, along with a CCTV image in which a man resembling him was seen accompanying her to the house. He strongly denied any connection, claiming that he did not know her. However, the clear photograph made the police skeptical, as the similarities were unmistakable. A brief verbal confrontation ensued, with Christopher maintaining his stance. During this exchange, he insisted that he would never bring a strange woman to his apartment. The police then became interested in Christopher's mobile phone, which they seized for examination. They discovered that it contained Lorraine's SIM card, although the card was currently missing. This evidence confirmed that he had at least seen her recently. Further investigation revealed that a suspicious post had been made on Lorraine's social media account using this mobile phone. It appeared that Christopher had sent strange messages to her loved ones. After the unsettling incident, whatever it was, he had taken Lorraine's phone. Rather than using it for communication, he inserted a SIM card into his own phone to access her contact list and social media account. This raised further suspicions about Christopher. He was the last person confirmed to have seen Lorraine alive, and his attempts to manipulate her account seemed suspicious. It became clear that he was trying to cover his tracks, raising questions about his motives that the authorities still needed to uncover. Christopher was arrested and charged with the kidnapping of Lorraine Cox. That same day, forensic experts arrived at his apartment to investigate. They used a substance called luminol to carefully examine the area. While they found several suspicious traces of evidence, the most alarming findings were in a nearby alley. During their search of the apartment, they discovered blood and numerous signs that supported the theory that Lorraine was dead, particularly around a garbage can. The forensic team speculated that Christopher might have disposed of evidence by throwing away the body. They searched the alley and found a large plastic bag inside one of the trash containers that contained human remains. However, it was not a complete body. Some parts, including the torso and head, were missing, making identification difficult. Consequently, the case shifted from a missing persons investigation to a murder investigation, and the work continued. Detectives learned that on the night of Lorraine's disappearance, in addition to Christopher, 5 other young men were present. However, none appeared on the CCTV footage with Lorraine. These men likely entered the apartment to buy food or for other reasons, but their involvement needed further investigation. They could have unwittingly been present during the crime or could have assisted in covering up evidence. Notably, the group behaved very differently. Except for Christopher, everyone was cooperative and willing to provide information. Upon further investigation, the 5 other young men were found to be locals who lived nearby. Since there was no evidence against them, they were released. In stark contrast, Christopher was uncooperative, reluctant to talk, and often gave vague or confusing answers. He seemed to believe that the police lacked sufficient evidence against him, but they soon discovered that his real name was Azam Mangori. This revelation marked a turning point in the investigation, as detectives confronted him with the truth, signaling the beginning of the unraveling of his story. Azam claims that he changed his name because he was born in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, where people who do not follow tradition can face severe punishment, including being stoned to death. As an adult, he left his conservative homeland but still lives in fear of being hunted down and killed. To avoid this dangerous situation, he began calling himself Christopher. He had been living illegally in the UK since December 2018 to avoid returning to Iraq. Azam also possessed a high-quality fake ID under the name Christopher Mayer to evade detection by immigration authorities. This explains why the landlord knew almost nothing about the man. He was very cautious, had not attended school or worked anywhere, and lived off odd jobs. However, the interrogation ended abruptly. After admitting to these things, he refused to talk about Lorraine. His previous admissions were not significant to the police. DNA testing confirmed that the remains found in a trash bin were those of Lorraine. In Azam's apartment, DNA traces and other evidence indicated that Lorraine had been killed there because Azam had failed to clean thoroughly. The police also discovered a large handsaw and replacement blades purchased after the crime. Other items found included a driver's license, a debit card, and a wallet, all mutilated. Nearby trash bins contained bloody clothing, Lorraine's phone, and a SIM card discarded in the sewer. Unfortunately, parts of her body were never recovered. Detectives analyzed the location data from Azam's mobile phone on the day of Lorraine's murder and the subsequent days when he disposed of evidence. This investigation led them to a location on the city's outskirts known as Tin Pit Hill. During the search, they found Lorraine's torso and head, which were not well concealed. Investigators noted unsettling details. A piece of clothing was stuffed into her mouth, and a patch of skin was missing from her back, possibly taken as a trophy by the perpetrator. Unfortunately, no other body parts were located, and the remains were in an advanced state of decomposition, complicating the determination of the cause of death. The forensic expert concluded that Lorraine had likely been strangled. Despite strong evidence of his guilt, Azam continued to deny his involvement and created false stories. He even attempted to involve banned organizations in the case. The trial commenced in spring 2021. Although he never confessed, Azam and his defense team significantly altered his narrative. He now claimed to have a normal orientation and stated that he encountered Lorraine when she came to his place late at night after a bar visit. He approached her on the street and convinced her to come to his apartment for some intimacy. Azam maintained that Lorraine voluntarily came to his apartment after drinking heavily and using illegal substances. He claimed that after trying those substances himself, he experienced severe distortion of perception and lost consciousness. When he regained awareness, he found Lorraine in the bathroom, unresponsive. He alleged that he saw a puddle of urine beneath her and believed she had overdosed. Azam attempted to perform CPR, but it was unsuccessful. In a panic and without knowing the emergency number, he sat on the bathroom floor next to her body. Hallucinations then began, and he claimed to see dark creatures emerging from her mouth, prompting him to shove a piece of his t-shirt into her mouth to stop it. He pushed the cloth in so far that it could have caused her to choke. Despite being in a state of panic, he managed to find and send a video he had recorded around the same time to a friend, where he appeared calm and even exhaled smoke into the camera. He explained that he filmed the video to help himself calm down. His behavior grew increasingly bizarre. Instead of calling for help, he decided to dispose of the body and planned to flee from his relatives. Naturally, this account sounded implausible, leaving him with no solid defense. According to Azam, he was unsure what he would do after Lorraine died and kept her body in his apartment until he decided to dispose of it. When his anxiety reached its peak, he chose to throw it away. He called a taxi to take the bag with the remains to a wooded area on the outskirts of Exeter. Prosecutors noted that he seemed to be obsessed with amputation, as evidenced by the precise cuts he made, which horrified forensic experts. It was clear he had researched this topic extensively and was well prepared. That evening, Azam tried to connect with people on an escort website, seeking companionship but was unsuccessful. Later, He saw Lorraine on the street eating alone and viewed her as an ideal target. It seems that Ozem may have premeditated this murder to fulfill his dark fantasies. Even with substantial evidence against him, his trial lasted 5 weeks. Ultimately, the jury found him guilty of murder and attempting to obstruct justice. He received a life sentence but is eligible for parole after 20 years, which means he could be released at the age of 44. Lorraine's boyfriend, Ellie, experienced profound grief, stating that a part of him died with her. He lives daily with this pain and struggles against despair. Lorraine's father, Tony, organized a charity march to rally support for his daughter. Participants silently walked the route she would have taken from the bar to her home, a journey she never completed. In the aftermath, Tony became an activist advocating for more CCTV cameras on UK streets to help prevent and solve violent crimes. He also started to make regular donations to an anti-abuse organization based in the UK. Even after justice was served, Lorraine Cox's family remained uncertain about how Ozem was able to lure her into his apartment. Security footage showed her following him willingly. Ozem claimed that he engaged her in conversation and offered her alcohol and a banned substance, which she accepted. However, toxicology reports found no traces of banned substances in her system, and a forensic expert stated that she did not die from diabetes, suggesting that Ozem's account might be false. Sadly, the truth about what happened in his apartment may never be revealed, as only Ozem and Lorraine know what truly occurred. Some believe Ozem exploited Lorraine's kindness by asking for help, and that she may have felt unable to refuse, ultimately leading her into a dangerous situation. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Teed family. What was supposed to be a peaceful holiday turned into a terrible nightmare, leaving the survivors with scars that would never heal. When the Teed family set out for their remote house to celebrate Christmas, they had no idea that their trip would lead them into a tragedy few could have imagined. So, what happened to them? Join me as we explore the story of today's case. Rolf Tita was born in Germany. When he was just 11 years old, he and his mother moved to the United States. Shortly after their arrival, his mother remarried and chose to begin a new life following her first unsuccessful marriage. Rolf was a quiet boy who excelled in his studies. When he started college, he met Kay. They were both studying similar subjects and shared similar life views. Like Rolf, Kay was calm and sociable, and she dreamed of building her American dream and starting a family with someone who shared her values. Rolf quickly seemed like the perfect match for her. They had so much in common that after their first meeting, they became inseparable. At this point, Rolf was just over 20 years old. Both of them had serious intentions for their future, and their parents supported their relationship, which was progressing well. The two of them decided to move to a new home and began a journey across the country. They first lived in Nevada, then in Utah, but this was just the start. As they traveled to various locations, Rolf and Kay enjoyed their time together and eventually chose to get married. Shortly after, they started planning their next move, looking for a larger house and considering starting a family. In 1963, the young couple moved to the small town of Humble, Texas, which had a population of around 10,000. They were dedicated members of the Christian church, loved children, and aspired to have a large family. They quickly became part of the local community and earned the respect of those around them. Unfortunately, the Tied couple faced challenges that prevented them from having children for many years. However, they found a solution. They decided to adopt. After adopting their second child, Kay was surprised to find out that she was pregnant again, which they viewed as a miracle. The pregnancy was so subtle that she didn't even realize it. She later gave birth to a healthy daughter named Trish. The family enjoyed a fulfilling life and happy, having everything they needed to cherish their time together. Rolf excelled in trading and had dreamed of starting his own business since his student days. By the time their children were born, he was earning a good income, which allowed Kay to stay home and focus on raising the children. Thanks to his hard work and entrepreneurial spirit, Rolf opened a company in 1969 that quickly became part of the Houston retail market. With their financial stability, they eventually purchased a house in Utah, a small town with just over 500 residents in the 1990s. The mountainous area felt peaceful and secluded. They found a beautiful house perched high in the mountains, and it was considered very safe, much quieter than the nearby towns. The locals were well acquainted with one another, and their family seamlessly integrated into this community. The house was located about 4 kilometers from the nearest road. A beautiful river flowed nearby, with trees lining both banks. Despite the transportation challenges, especially in winter, their family made it a tradition to spend the entire Christmas holiday there every year. To reach the house, they would leave their car in a parking lot near the road and use snowmobiles to travel up into the mountains, as this was the quickest way to get there. By December 1990, their family's routine had not changed. They planned to return to their forest house for the Christmas holidays. On December 20th, Kay and her son, Sean, flew from Texas to Oakley, where her sister Claudia Tidwell Nelson picked her up. Claudia drove her so they could wait together for the others. Rolf, Line, and Trish were scheduled to arrive the following evening, December 21st. Typically, Rolf wrapped up his work before the vacation, while Kay visited her sister Claudia to help organize the gathering and prepare food and supplies for their trip to the mountains. At the usual spot where they parked their cars to switched modes of transportation, Kay and Claudia noticed a young man who looked suspicious. Even though it was freezing outside, he was wearing light shoes and a thin shirt, which was quite odd. They offered to assist him, but he didn't respond and instead walked faster, quickly disappearing from view. They reached their house just before sunset and had dinner. Claudia chose to stay overnight. In the morning, thinking she saw a figure outside the window. Claudia and Kay searched for any signs outside but found nothing. It appeared that someone had used their paths without being seen. Ultimately, they chose to focus on getting ready for the busy weekend ahead. On December 21st, by the time Rolf and his daughters arrived, everything is almost ready. Kay shared details about recent events, including a suspicious person she had encountered while with Claudia. She felt particularly uneasy about this stranger, who seemed to belong to the area. Kay suggested that Rolf take hunting rifles and transport them to the house on a snowmobile, just in case something unexpected occurred. However, Rolf declined, believing there was no need for such precautions. He felt confident that everything would be fine and thought that carrying weapons in everyday life was too dangerous. In fact, Rolf lacked experience with rifles and pistols. He mentioned that this area has been the safest in the last 100 years. In the suburbs, there has only been one incident, which was not even related to gunfire. Despite some aggressive driving and poor behavior on the roads, there have only been a few robberies over several decades. Unfortunately, he was unaware of how dangerous some people in the area had become. Kay expressed that something was off, so she decided to take precautions. She grabbed a couple of rifles and loaded them onto the snowmobile, saying it would make her feel safer. Her husband did not object. An adult among the teenagers helped move their belongings into the house. Claudia left in the morning to buy supplies she had forgotten for the upcoming holiday. Kay and Rolf decorated their home and prepared for a celebration. Because they lacked some necessities, they decided to go to the city to buy more. At this time, Sean, feeling overwhelmed by the busyness, asked to stay the night with his Aunt Claudia, which likely helped him relax. After dropping Sean off, their family visited Kay's mother, Beth. At that time, she was 72 years old, had poor eyesight, and was partially paralyzed due to a car accident earlier that year. Kay and her family visited her regularly and often took her to their home. This visit was no different. They spent the evening talking and enjoying each other's company, preparing to leave for the mountains the next day. On December 2nd, around noon, Teed family went to town. It was a particularly frosty day. The group then split up. Rolf and Trish planned to return to the cabin, while Kay, Linny, and Beth walked towards their house in the mountains. The two groups ended up about 2 hours apart. Kay and Linny arrived at their destination first and intended to set up a chair. While stopping near the garage, Linny noticed a dark figure in the main bedroom. Mistaking it for her cousin David, she didn't think much of it. Linny ran in, immediately turned on the hot water to warm her hands, and with her peripheral vision, she saw a dark figure hiding behind the refrigerator. Thinking it was just David, trying to scare her, she laughed to herself. However, when the figure stepped into the light, she realized it wasn't David at all. It was a young man with curly hair, he pointing a gun at her. She attempted to alert the others, but they had already noticed the armed intruder. Kay felt powerless against the intruder, regretted not grabbing a gun from the garage. He commanded Linny to help her grandmother and mother go upstairs. Beth, with her daughter and granddaughter, struggled to ascend to the second floor, worried that the intruder might start attacking if they didn't hurry. Another man wearing glasses appeared, also holding a weapon. Kay panicked, pleaded for their lives, promising to give anything. Without hesitation, the stranger man with curly hair attacked her by force. She fell to the ground, screaming in pain. The assailant attacked her several more times. Then, he aimed the gun at Beth and also attacked by force her in the face. Surprisingly, Beth did not die. She collapsed but quickly tried to get back up. The thug attacked her again multiple times. He confused about needing to use so many bullets, while another man seemed to enjoy the chaos. Linny prepared for her own fate, but unexpectedly, she was taken to the bedroom. The intruders gagged her with a dirty sock and tied her hands and feet. One of the two strangers brought a dog and handed over for Linny, claiming it would calm her down. They left her and returned to their shot victims. Gang leader continues to attack Kay and Beth, then took all the jewelry from the dead and emptied their pockets of valuables. They dragged the bodies outside, leaving them in front of Linny. She had just witnessed her grandmother and mother die. Simultaneously, she realized her father and younger sister would be home soon. She was in danger herself and wanted to warn them, but there was no time. At 2:45 p.m., Rolf and Trish rode snowmobiles back to the house. Sean still lives with Claudia. Meanwhile, the killers were waiting for new victims, and one of them held a weapon to Linny's head, threatening to kill her if she made a sound. When Rolf entered the house, he saw Linny being used as a human shield by an armed man who had a weapon pressed to her head. The strangers confronted Rolf and the rest in the living room. The newcomers immediately noticed the bodies of their loved ones and wanted to help, but the attackers prevented them from doing so. In a desperate attempt, Rolf began emptying his pockets, giving the criminals cash and his expensive watch. However, the leader ordered his partner to attack Rolf. The second attacker hesitated, clearly reluctant to get involved. Finally, the leader aimed his pistol and pulled the trigger, but it only clicked. He tried again, and still nothing happened. The third time, he succeeded in attacking Rolf. Trish panicked to see her father collapse to the floor, bleeding. The attackers then searched Trish's bag, but did nothing to her. Instead of escalating the violence, the criminals took Linny and Trish to a bedroom, then locked them inside. They found canisters of gasoline stored in the house for snowmobiles, and began pouring it everywhere. They chatted casually, unwrapped Teed family's gifts, and filmed their antics with a camera they found in the home. They even enjoyed a festive meal prepared by Kay. It seemed they had planned to destroy all evidence of their presence, and they acted nonchalantly. They then returned to Rolf. The leader attacked him in the back of the head again, and subsequently poured gasoline over his body as well. The criminals ordered Trish and Linny to load all the stolen items onto snowmobiles, which were in the garage. They didn't use gasoline to set the garage on fire, as they needed it for their escape. A guy loaded his gun, unbuttoned his jacket, and revealed a knife. Lini noticed this, and he assured her. The criminals then set fire to the house and drove away with the two girls as hostages. While driving the snowmobiles, Trish and Line considered their options for escaping. They thought about crashing into a tree or causing an accident to get rid of their captors, but they couldn't come up with a plan. During this time, their uncle, Randy Zorn, was driving his car to the Tide family home. He encountered the snowmobile carrying criminals and waved to them, thinking they were familiar faces, possibly his nieces with their boyfriends. However, he was taken aback when they didn't respond to his greeting. Normally, Line and Trish were respectful and would greet him back. The criminals didn't recognize Randy and simply drove past him. In the parking lot, the strangers transferred the girls into Tide family's car. It was the car Rolf brought the food to. They filled with fear that the experience of their death would be painful. With no other choice, they complied and took their seats in the back of the car. Randy also arrived in the parking lot and waved to them. However, Line and Trish ignored him because they feared he might become the next target of the killers. The leader of the group noticed Randy and asking Line if she knew him. She responded that she did not recognize the man. Right after that, the car carrying the hostages left the scene. A moment later, Randy saw a man coming. There was severe frost, but he was without a jacket, without shoes, and even without a hat. It seemed his face was literally torn apart, with drops of blood frozen on him and his face swollen. Randy recognized it was Rolf. Rolf told of the attack on his family. Remarkably, he survived and managed to escape to the parking lot in an effort. He said, the attackers broke into his house in the woods, doused it with gasoline, and set it on fire. The fire quickly spread, but Rolf pretended to be dead and waited until the chaos died down before taking action. He initially tried to put out the fire, but the fire spread quickly due to the gasoline, causing his jacket to catch fire. He ran into the bathroom, took it off and suffering only minor burns. Fortunately, the garage was not on fire. Driven by the desire to save his daughters, Rolf pursued the kidnappers for 4 kilometers, despite being injured and having impaired vision. He knew the route well enough to reach his destination, but he clearly needed urgent medical attention. Randy put him in the car and drove towards the city, but the medical center was too far away. Randy fears that there may not be enough time to save Rolf's life. He called emergency services, requesting the helicopter and reporting a fire. Meanwhile, the criminals with the hostages were heading towards the canyon. Suddenly, a patrol car passed by them. The police car quickly turned around and began to follow the criminals. The kidnappers ignored the officers' demands to stop and sped up to 150 km/h. With the bad weather and slippery roads, the situation was extremely dangerous. The criminals trying to escape from the police drove past a checkpoint. Several patrol cars joined the chase, and about half an hour later, the criminals got stuck on an embankment. They attempted to climb out to flee. Meanwhile, Line and Trish seized the opportunity to escape, ran towards the police. When the hostages are safe, a brief shootout ensued. Line pleaded with the police to handle the attackers who had killed her mother, father, and grandmother. The criminals surrendered immediately. Both were detained without sustaining injuries. Meanwhile, doctors arrived quickly by helicopter to take Rolf to the hospital. They fought to save his life. Despite being attacked in the face and then in the back of the head, Rolf miraculously survived the attack and remained conscious for most of it. He later recovered without experiencing severe consequences from his injuries. Right after that, firefighters fought the fire. The house did not burn down completely, but the property was seriously damaged. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they described it as the most terrible thing they had seen during their work. There was blood all around, with the bodies of the victims left inside the house, was a terrible smell of burnt corpses' flesh. Here they find cameras recording footage of the criminals holding the victims and laughing at them. Based on camera footage, The criminals were arrested, and they are only 25 years old. The killer himself, Von Taylor, had curly hair and was the instigator. Both guys had served time in the Utah State Prison before this crime. In there, Taylor for burglary and arson, while his partner, Edward Delly, had less serious charges. They met each other in a rehabilitation center where they were sent shortly before the end of their prison term. Here, they were prepared to start life from scratch without crime. However, instead, a cunning and bloody plan was born in the minds of the criminals. They escaped from the rehabilitation center instead of integrating into society. On December 14, the thugs hitchhiked to Oakley, where Taylor's father had his own house. There, they spent about a week planning the robbery. In fact, on the day of their arrival at Tidy's house, Kay saw a suspicious guy in the parking lot. Without outerwear, he was just examining the nearby houses in search of another target for robbery. Kay and Beth immediately attracted his attention. On December 22, the criminals broke into the house of the Tidy family when they left for the city. The attackers behaved like the owners, even having fun murders and thefts. They decided to use Trish and Linnea as human shields, planning to get to New York, then get rid of the hostages and disappear into the big city. On January 22, Taylor and Delly were officially charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and 2 counts of aggravated kidnapping. In addition, there are other crimes including theft, arson, and resisting arrest, not to mention escaping from a correctional facility. Both immediately said they had mental problems. However, the examination did not reveal any mental abnormalities in them. They were simply stalling for time. 5 months later, Taylor pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder in exchange for all other charges being dropped. Taylor admitted at trial that he was the mastermind behind all of this. He attacked Beth and Kay and felt no remorse. The medical examiner found that Kay had 5 wounds, and Beth also was struck by 3 bullets. Rolf was attacked in the face and then doused with gasoline. When Rolf entered the courtroom, Taylor recognized him. Taylor's face was frozen in surprise, even cursed, and could not believe that Rolf had survived. Ultimately, Taylor was sentenced to death. Despite the confession of the mastermind, Edward Delly pleaded not guilty and decided to appear in court. 2 weeks after Taylor was convicted of murder, Delly's trial began. He had no idea that Rolf had survived, but he from the very beginning showed remorse and insisted that he was not involved in the deaths. He did not kill anyone. According to him, the original plan was to rob, and Delly did not expect that Taylor would start killing. He refused to shoot anyone. Naturally, the prosecution tried to portray Delly as exactly the same cruel person as Taylor. He insisted that he could not pull the trigger. This meant that Rolf, who had witnessed the events, could be the defendant's only chance to escape from a lethal injection. Delly's lawyer tried every way to present a favorable picture for him. Linnea also testified in court. She remembered how Delly brought a dog into her room, saying that it should calm her down. Also, he talked to her and Trish to reassure them. It was he who told them to get out of the car when the car stopped. When the court agency discussed finding Delly guilty of second-degree murder, it meant that he received a life sentence, but with the right to parole. The Tiade family filed a lawsuit against the state. They wanted compensation for the deaths of Kay and Beth. According to the survivors, it was the state leadership that was to blame for the escape that the prisoners made from the rehabilitation center, because this led to the bloody massacre. In fact, the claims were quite justified. It became known that on December 22, Von Taylor called his friend named Scott Manley. He told Scott that he and Delly had escaped from a rehabilitation center and also stolen a weapon. Scott admitted that by that time, Taylor and Delly had already robbed several houses in Oakley and now intended to deal with an entire family. Scott was afraid of their intentions and immediately contacted law enforcement officers, telling them about Taylor's confessions. Despite this, the police simply ignored the message. Unfortunately, the court rejected the Teed family's claims, and no one was punished for their negligence. In 2001, Line received a letter from Delhi in which he asked for forgiveness. He wrote that life in prison had changed him. Before, he was just a stupid young man who followed the example of a friend who showed him a cool lifestyle. Line read this letter over and over again, in tears and with hatred. Finally, 10 years later, she decided to throw off the burden and wrote a response to Delhi, in which she stated that she forgave him. After that, she felt much better. After the verdict was passed, Delhi did not try to appeal the court's decision. Most likely, he will never be released from prison, given the severity of the crime in which he took part. Meanwhile, Taylor has filed 4 appeals. He cited various reasons, including the bias of the jury. All these absurd appeals were rejected. However, these appeals helped him repeatedly push back his execution date. Sometime later, Rolf fully recovered from his injuries and renovated the house. He now enjoys spending time remembering his loved ones. Line and Trish got married and became mothers of many children. Long after that, Rolf died of cancer surrounded by loved ones in 2008. The horrific case of the Teed family not only left an indelible mark of loss, but also shook the community to recognize the fragility of personal safety, even in the most peaceful places. The story of Line and Trish Teed's resilience serves as a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Decades have passed since the case, but the lessons from this tragedy remain relevant, highlighting the importance of justice, compassion, and the ongoing efforts to protect communities from similar atrocities. Thank you for watching. If you liked my work, subscribe to the channel, support this video with a like, and let's discuss this story in the comments. Thank you all and goodbye. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Claudia Ornisi. On the morning of July 21, 2011, Stefan contacted the police in Cremona, Italy. Stefan, a resident of the city, had a daily routine of visiting his daughter, Claudia, and his 2-year-old granddaughter, Livia, for coffee. He would spend time with them, chatting, discussing news, playing with Livia, and then continuing with his day. However, on this particular morning, Stefan was deeply alarmed when he couldn't follow his usual routine. Stefan called Claudia several times before going to her house, but she did not answer, which made him very worried. Soon after, he went to her house on Via de Galli, rang the doorbell and knocked on the door, but still no one answered. Using a spare key that Claudia had entrusted to him for emergencies, he entered the house. As soon as he stepped inside, he noticed a strange, overwhelming smell that resembled a gas leak. Holding his breath, he began checking the rooms, fearing the worst. When he entered Claudia's bedroom, he discovered her lying motionless on the bed. He tried to wake her by shaking her, but she didn't respond. In a nearby crib was his niece, Livia, also motionless and cold, like Claudia. In a state of panic, Stefan rushed to the neighbors for help. An emergency rescue team of doctors and police arrived at 8:30 a.m., but both Claudia and Livia were dead. Stefan was devastated, especially by the sight of his little granddaughter motionless, wrapped in her blanket in the crib. From the beginning, investigators suspected that Claudia had taken her own life and that of her daughter. However, some inconsistencies have emerged. First, the strong smell of gas was concerning. An expert inspected the apartment and discovered 4 small propane gas cylinders, the kind typically used for camping stoves. One was positioned right next to Claudia's head at the bed, while the other 3 were placed in the corners of the room. It appeared as though she had intentionally filled the room with gas to end her life painlessly. The question, however, is whether 4 small cylinders could release enough gas to reach lethal concentrations in an uninsulated room to kill both Claudia and Livia. The apartment showed signs of ordinary disarray, consistent with a home shared with a young child. On the kitchen table, detectives found 10 nearly empty packages of Xanax, each originally containing 10 pills. Only 5 pills remained across all the packages. What caught their attention was how methodically the empty blister packs were arranged. They were stacked neatly in a row, almost as if placed that way intentionally to draw notice. This meticulous organization seemed unusual for someone in a state of despair and further heightened investigators' suspicions. Any theories needed verification. What investigators uncovered revealed a disturbing scenario. Initially, they considered the possibility that Claudia had attempted to end her life. If she had ingested 95 Xanax tablets, an overdose could have been the cause of death. However, toxicology tests showed that the drug levels in her blood were too low for such an amount. While small traces of the drug were present, they were far from enough to indicate she had taken 95 tablets. The results suggested she had been sedated and lost consciousness. What is suspicious is that Livia's blood test showed the same result as well. Judging from the bedroom scene, it appeared Claudia placed the gas cylinders, sealed their nozzles with duct tape, and began filling the room with gas. She left her daughter in the crib and then lay down next to her. This appeared to suggest a planned suicide murder, but inconsistencies in the story began to surface. For one, Claudia's relatives were firmly against the idea of voluntary suicide. The woman had no known reason to take her own life. She had never suffered from mental illness, harmful addictions, or depression. Moreover, Claudia adored her daughter so much that even if she had wanted to take her own life, she would never allow her beloved child to die. This confidence undermined the detective's suicide theory. Given the circumstances of the victim's life at the time of her death, Claudia Arn was a 40-year-old single mother. She grew up in a warm, loving family environment surrounded by her parents and sisters. She was described as a calm, kind, and pleasant woman, full of life. Motherhood had been a dream come true for her, a way to fully embrace and express her femininity. Claudia had always cherished the idea of having a family and children. Everyone who knew her described her as a devoted mother and role model. It was unimaginable for those close to her that she would harm her child under any circumstances. Though Claudia had experienced challenges in her personal life, they were not significant enough to suggest she would take such a drastic step. No matter how hard the detectives tried to find solid evidence proving this was a voluntary suicide, doubts kept arising. Claudia simply did not have a clear motive to take her life, let alone harm her child. The longer the police analyzed the crime scene, the more discrepancies they uncovered with the original suicide theory. For example, detectives could not find garbage bags in the apartment, where the cardboard packaging for the Xanax blister packs should logically have been discarded. This absence seemed peculiar. If Claudia had decided to commit suicide, taking out the trash would hardly have been a priority. This observation only deepened the mystery further. The detectives questioned whether someone preparing to take 95 pills would also think about taking the time to throw out the trash. Additionally, they noticed that the control levers on the electric meter were lowered and its lid was left open. This also seemed inappropriate for Claudia's situation. However, it was speculated that she might have been afraid an explosion could occur if gas had been filled. Suspicions were further fueled and the autopsy results came in. According to the forensic expert, Claudia and her daughter died from gas poisoning after losing consciousness from the drugs. However, fire experts denied this possibility, given the level of propane saturation in the room. 4 gas cylinders were clearly not enough to kill 2 people. This added weight to the version involving a third party. Investigators began to suspect that Claudia could not have voluntarily left this life. It was alleged that gas poisoning occurred when bags filled with gas were placed on the heads of Claudia and her daughter. Evidence of this came from the characteristic adhesive tape traces found during a thorough examination of the bodies. In this case, only 1 cylinder per person would have been needed, but it was deemed impossible for Claudia to do this by herself. The more the detectives analyzed the evidence, the more obvious it became that this was murder. The suicide theory was quickly abandoned. When detectives inspected the gas cylinders, suspicions only grew stronger, as no fingerprints were found on their surface. The idea that Claudia could have carefully wiped every canister clean before placing it on the floor seemed absurd. While the use of gloves could justify this, no such gloves were found anywhere. Although they might have been discarded, there was no evidence to support this. Additionally, there were no fingerprints on the Xanax blisters either. This raises further concern, as handling removing 95 pills would inevitably leave a trace. It became increasingly clear that detectives were looking for a killer, or potentially multiple killers, who were involved in this crime. Investigators shifted their attention to the gas cylinders and Xanax, focusing on tracing their origin using the serial numbers on the packaging. The process was complex and laborious, as it involved not only the city of Crema but also the entire Lombardia region. Through a thorough investigation, they traced it to the town of Cariati, which has a shopping mall. There, they found the gas canister and Xanax that matched the shipments found at the crime scene. Records showed that the pills were purchased there on July 16, 2011, just 4 days before the tragic incident. However, the buyer paid in cash and used a non-personalized discount card, making it difficult to identify them. Nonetheless, investigators persisted and uncovered that the individual had used the card on July 19 to buy food and beverages in a nearby city. Fortunately, a store clerk remembered the customer, a grumpy man, estimated to be 45 to 50 years old, of average height and elegantly dressed. He spoke eloquently but did not provide his name. The July 19 purchases raised further suspicion, as the man bought adhesive tape, potentially used to secure the buttons on the gas cylinders, causing them to release gas automatically. At this stage, the man's identity was still unknown. Authorities were working to determine who might have had a motive to harm Claudia and her daughter. The evidence suggested someone close to Claudia, as there were no signs of forced entry, indicating that she had willingly allowed the person into her home. This led investigators to focus on people she knew well. Ultimately, they concluded that the prime suspect was her ex-partner, Maurizio Iori, a well-known ophthalmologist in Crema and the biological father of her daughter, Livia. Maurizio was a man of good reputation, with a successful career and a respected family background. Claudia had a brief but intense relationship with him, which started in 2008 when she visited him as a patient. Mauricio's polite, kind, and professional demeanor immediately appealed to Claudia, who was lonely at the time. She quickly developed feelings for him. Being a prominent and accomplished man, he soon invited her on a date, and his refined manners and attentiveness captured her heart. However, their journey toward happiness faced a significant obstacle. Claudia was single and free, while Maurizio was married with 2 children. From the beginning, this bothered Claudia, but Maurizio reassured her that his marriage was troubled and he was planning to get divorced soon. As their relationship deepened, they began meeting in secret, often traveling to other cities to avoid raising suspicion from Mauricio's wife. He explained that secrecy was necessary because if the affair were discovered, it could complicate the divorce process and division of assets. Claudia gradually felt trapped in the role of a mistress and started to question her place in the relationship. Conflicts occasionally surfaced, but Maurizio always managed to calm her down, urging her to wait until the situation was resolved. Her hopes for a better outcome were shattered in May 2008, when Claudia discovered she was pregnant. For Maurizio, the news was unwelcome and infuriating, as he made it clear he did not want children outside of his marriage. This heightened the tension between them, leading to their separation. Claudia pinned her hopes on the child, believing motherhood would bring her happiness and purpose, but instead, the pregnancy further deepened her struggles. After their breakup, Claudia began to see Maurizio differently. She realized he was never truly committed to building a family with her but was only interested in having fun on the side. His politeness and kindness disappeared entirely. He pressured her to have an abortion, but she was shocked and devastated, so she refused and was determined to keep the pregnancy under all circumstances. For 3 months, Maurizio persisted in urging her to end the pregnancy, but Claudia held her ground. Eventually, He met with her again and made his intentions clear. His primary concern was protecting his reputation. He insisted that no one should ever find out about Claudia or their child. He demanded that she keep her distance and avoid contacting him. Claudia, however, refused to comply. Feeling deceived and betrayed, she was determined that her daughter would not grow up in secrecy or obscurity. Resolute in safeguarding her and her child's future, Claudia sought legal help to force Maurizio to recognize his paternity. As Claudia's pregnancy advanced, Maurizio finalized his divorce. To her dismay, she discovered he had started a relationship with another woman before breaking up with her. Even more shocking, this new girlfriend was also expecting a child. This confirmed Claudia's belief that Maurizio had been dishonest and deceitful toward her. In the meantime, he concentrated on safeguarding his own interests. He was preparing to marry his new partner, a wealthy woman who aligned with his social status. He feared that if information about his relationship with Claudia or the fact that he had a child out of wedlock were revealed, his career and reputation would be severely affected. He admitted this fear to Claudia frankly. On February 3, 2009, Claudia gave birth to her daughter, Livia. Over time, Maurizio softened slightly and agreed to provide limited support for Claudia and the baby, who lived with Claudia's parents. He pledged to pay $400 per month for Livia's expenses and purchased an apartment for them, covering its mortgage. However, he restricted himself to visiting his daughter only once a week. This arrangement strained their already tense relationship. Despite everything, Claudia remained hopeful, believing that Maurizio might eventually develop genuine love and affection for Livia, grow into his role as a caring father. The last scheduled meeting between Maurizio and Livia was set for July 20, 2011. Claudia's mother told the police that Claudia had been feeling unwell, and Maurizio planned to visit to support her. He suggested they have dinner featuring sushi, a surprisingly out-of-character choice for him. Claudia's mother immediately found his behavior strange. Maurizio disliked fish and had never stayed with them for more than an hour, let alone brought food or made thoughtful gestures. Additionally, he brought a package of sauce that police would later confirm he had purchased on July 19, 2011, a detail that would become critical in the subsequent investigation. Claudia's mother grew convinced that Maurizio was connected to what happened afterward. Her greatest distress came from Claudia's genuine belief that Maurizio was finally trying to put effort into their relationship. Claudia had been so optimistic about the dinner, even borrowing her mother's best items for the occasion. Tragically, those items were later found the next morning on the lifeless bodies of Claudia and her child. The police quickly launched an investigation and identified Maurizio as the main suspect, bringing him in for questioning. While denying any involvement, he voluntarily went to the station and stated that he had not been at Claudia's apartment that evening. He provided an alibi, claiming that on July 20th, he left his office at 6:30 p.m., got takeaway food, ate it at home, and then went to the cinema at 9 p.m. He said he paid for his movie ticket in cash and returned home to sleep after watching the film. Mauricio's alibi fell apart quickly. He claimed he didn't keep his cinema ticket, but police reviewed security footage and confirmed he wasn't among the 38 people leaving the session. His mobile phone data added to the inconsistencies, as it showed his phone had stayed near a beach house several kilometers away during the entire evening, contradicting his claim of being at the cinema. It became clear that Maurizio had lied about his whereabouts. When police questioned Mauricio's wife, she revealed that she had tried to contact him multiple times without success. Starting at 7:30 p.m. and continuing until 11 p.m., she repeatedly called him, but he never answered. She also tried reaching his office and friends, but no one knew where he was. Eventually, she contacted a neighbor near their beach house, who confirmed seeing Mauricio's car parked outside. Suspecting he was inside, the neighbor called him but received no response. Upon entering the unlocked house, it was empty, but Mauricio's phone had been left behind for the entire evening. As investigators searched the house, they discovered a note addressed to Maurizio, written by Claudia. The note revealed a shocking secret about Mauricio's illegitimate child. The neighbor, who noticed the note, alerted the police for further investigation. Later, Maurizio returned to the beach house around 2 a.m. and called both his wife and the police to assure them he was safe. However, his explanations only deepened suspicions. Police proceeded with the investigation, increasingly convinced that Mauricio's lies and attempts to hide the truth were unraveling. Based on the CCTV footage, he did not return to the beach house, which led investigators to believe that he was at Claudia's house during that time, confronting his daughter and his estranged lover. His alibi was shattered by his wife's nervousness, which further complicated matters. Maurizio, a well-known ophthalmologist, resorted to lying, raising even more suspicion. Evidence against him mounted rapidly. It was revealed that he had purchased multiple packages of Xanax at a shopping center in another city, paying in cash, likely to avoid detection. Store employees later identified him through receipts linking to online orders found on his computer, as well as from search history showing he had researched how to kill someone with propane or Xanax. He seemed particularly interested in the case of a Moroccan prisoner who died due to a propane gas tank. When questioned about these suspicious purchases, including gas cylinders, Maurizio claimed that Claudia had spoken about using them to heat baby food for Livia. However, the Supreme Court found this explanation unconvincing. Overwhelmed by the mounting evidence, he eventually confessed that he had not gone to the cinema that evening as he initially claimed. Instead, he admitted to visiting Claudia and stated that when he left, she and Livia were alive and well. He claimed to have no knowledge of what happened afterward. Maurizio justified his lies as an attempt to conceal his affair from his wife and mislead investigators. Nonetheless, his extramarital relationship, along with his deep resentment toward his daughter Livia, became widely known. During a police search of the house, officers discovered a dramatic letter detailing these incidents and emotions. Claudia described Maurizio as a ruthless and deceitful man who betrayed her. It was after the birth of her child that she felt the full weight of despair. Her frustration stemmed from Mauricio's cold and even cruel behavior toward the baby girl immediately after her birth. It seemed as though he viewed the child as inferior. At the same time, Claudia discovers that Maurizio has an illegitimate child and plans to marry the child's mother soon. The arrival of the baby left Claudia confused and hurt, unable to understand why Maurizio treated her and their child so poorly. It became apparent that he did not consider her his equal, had no intention of marrying her, and had no plans to remain a father to their child, Livia. Meanwhile, Mauricio's mother, Paola, played a dominant role in his life. It was clear that Maurizio was completely under her control. He feared her disapproval and, as an adult, would hide details about his personal life, relationships to avoid her judgment. Even though Paola was unaware of his affair and its consequences, he seemed convinced that Claudia would never gain his mother's acceptance under any circumstances. As a result, he kept Claudia a secret, but she began pressuring him nonetheless. His intentions and motivations were unclear, particularly since he consistently denied any wrongdoing. Most of the evidence in the case was circumstantial, and authorities were unable to locate the murder weapon. Investigators focused on finding a bag of trash from Claudia's apartment, believing it contained critical evidence such as gloves and pill packaging. Maurizio likely disposed of the bag. In her letter, Claudia hinted at being blackmailed, which may have cornered her. Meanwhile, Livia was mostly rejected by Maurizio and encountered hostility even before her birth. The tipping point for Mauricio's decision to kill Claudia and Livia appears to have been her demand that he take full responsibility for Livia, treat her as an equal member of his family, and stop belittling her. Maurizio saw this as a serious threat to his carefully constructed life, his reputation, financial stability, and, above all, his mother's approval. Financial issues played a significant role as well. Claudia did not work, leaving all her expenses to be covered by Maurizio. Evidence revealed that, 3 months before the murder, Maurizio had been researching ways to recover mortgage payments for the apartment he had bought for Claudia. This indicates that he meticulously planned the crime to minimize financial losses stemming from the affair. On the night of October 11, 2011, Claudia and Livia were waiting for Maurizio to visit, as planned. He arrived with sushi, soy sauce, and drinks, all of which had been laced with a sedative. Claudia dressed up and prepared her daughter for the evening, hoping to charm Maurizio and mend their relationship. However, he had come with the intention of committing a double murder. After dinner, Claudia and Livia lost consciousness from the sedatives. Maurizio carries them into the bedroom and stages the scene to make it look like Claudia has harmed her and her daughter. He placed gas-filled bags over their heads, sealing them with tape. Once they were dead, he cleaned the scene thoroughly to remove any evidence, disposed of incriminating items, and left. Around 3 a.m., he drove to his beach house. On October 14, 2011, Maurizio Iori was arrested and charged with the premeditated murders of Claudia and Livia. The trial shocked the public, as it was hard to believe that a respected doctor could kill his mistress and their child. Despite the defense's arguments and requests for a reduced sentence, the court found the crime to be carefully planned. In January 2013, Maurizio Iori was sentenced to life in prison. His lawyers appealed, but the Supreme Court upheld the sentence in 2015. He was also ordered to pay $600,000 in compensation to Claudia's family. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Maurizio maintained his innocence and continued to speak to journalists, describing the trial as unfair and claiming he had been framed by the authorities. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Mindy Berenyi. Mindy Berenyi grew up in a small farming town in Antwerp, Ohio, in a middle-class family. Her mother, Shirley, met her future husband, Andy, while she was still in school. At the time, Andy was 18 and had completed his auto mechanic training, while Shirley was 17 and still in high school. Their relationship progressed quickly, and they married just a few months after meeting. Shortly after their marriage, Shirley discovered that she was pregnant by another man she had dated before meeting Andy. She had not been unfaithful to Andy, it was simply the result of a previous relationship. Shirley hesitated for a long time, but eventually, Andy accepted both her and the baby as his family. The couple stayed together for 15 years and had 3 children during their marriage. 2 of the children were Andy's, while the eldest was from Shirley's previous relationship. However, after 15 years of marriage, they decided to divorce. Shirley, feeling she could no longer cope as a single mother, gave up custody of all 3 children. The children went to live with Andy, their father. Mindy always loved her father. However, disturbing changes began to disrupt her life. When Mindy was about 9 years old, her father called her into his bedroom and asked her to give him a massage. Years later, Mindy realized this was the beginning of the abuse. At the time, she did not fully understand what was happening and complied, even though she felt something was wrong. She later recalled that it did not feel like a normal massage. Eventually, Mindy refused to go to her father's bedroom. From that point on, Andy's treatment of her became much harsher. Andy began to manipulate his children emotionally, insulting them and even resorting to physical violence. This caused Mindy's brothers to leave the house. Andy eventually remarried, which seemed to improve the strained family relationships, but nothing truly changed. He continued to exert tight control over Mindy, especially as she grew older. Like any teenager, Mindy wanted to spend time with her friends, but her father would not allow it. His behavior became increasingly controlling and manipulative. When Mindy got a job at a nearby McDonald's, Andy kept a close eye on her. He tracked the mileage on his car when she drove, frequently searched her room, and even recorded and listened to Mindy's phone conversations. When Andy was away from home, he turned off his phone to prevent his daughter from communicating with anyone without his supervision. She wanted to stay in touch with her friends and live like a normal teenager, but this angered her father. He would eavesdrop on Mindy's conversations and immediately disconnect her phone from the network if he heard something he disliked. He demanded complete obedience from her, but Mindy refused to comply. When Mindy turned 16, Andy's behavior became increasingly dangerous. He would grab and strangle her when she resisted his control. He would throw her around and beat her while trying to avoid leaving any evidence. The situation worsened when Andy discovered she was pregnant, although the identity of the father was unknown. Mindy was devastated, unable to imagine raising a child in such a hostile environment. Her father's abusive behavior had become unbearable, and she feared for her life and well-being. That same day, Mindy stormed into Andy's upstairs bedroom and grabbed a shotgun hanging on the wall. She then ran into the bathroom, intending to take her own life. Andy was not home at the time, but by the time Mindy changed her mind and decided to put the shotgun away to avoid her father's detection, it was too late. When Andy walked in and saw his daughter holding the gun, he immediately flew into a rage. Mindy later said she was terrified and thought she was in serious trouble. Andy turned away to close the door, saying he would deal with her right away. Moments later, a gunshot rang out. At approximately 4:16 p.m. on September 27th, Joni, Andy's second wife, called the police. When police arrived at the scene, they found Andy lying on the floor. Mindy claimed that she had acted in self-defense. According to Mindy, she had endured years of abuse, along with constant psychological pressure and total control from her abusive father, Andy, who would punish her for even the smallest mistakes. In an attempt to defend herself, she accidentally shot and killed her father. Lawyers accepted her testimony and planned to fight for her acquittal. However, a significant challenge was that Mindy rarely spoke about her struggles or the abuse she endured. Her father, Andy, had restricted her interactions with others, only allowing her to communicate with others when he was supervised. As a result, she had no opportunity to confide in her friends or anyone else about her situation. Additionally, there were no bruises or injuries on her body. This lack of evidence created serious obstacles to convincing the jury that this was indeed a case of self-defense. Shirley, Mindy's mother, supported her daughter's testimony. Mindy had repeatedly complained about her father's abusive behavior, but Shirley had dismissed each time as isolated incidents. Mindy would then reassure her mother that everything was fine, leading her to believe that her daughter was exaggerating. Now, Mindy claimed that her father had threatened her, and Shirley admitted that Andy had behaved similarly throughout their marriage. While at the police station, Shirley revealed that she had also suffered abusive behavior from her husband, which was the main reason for their divorce. However, she did not expect that Andy would use the same tactics on their daughter. The situation became even more complicated when Mindy faced information isolation. She was unable to socialize comfortably with others and could only occasionally spend a few minutes on the phone without Andy's supervision. Despite everything, Shirley supported her daughter. Andy's second wife, Joni, who had been married to him for 8 years, defended him. She described Andy as a loving husband and devoted father, raising 2 sons and doing his best for his ungrateful daughter, Mindy. She saw him as a decent man who was unfairly labeled a tyrant to justify the murder. According to Joni, Andy spent much of his free time with his children, often taking them to the nearby river to fish and boat. This account was supported by all of Andy's neighbors. Joni described her husband as a hardworking man who devoted his life to his family. Andy's relatives were steadfast in their support of him, insisting that he was never cruel or manipulative. From the beginning, they described Mindy as an insecure and disobedient child whose negative traits worsened as she grew older. They portrayed her as a pathological liar and a rebellious individual who frequently tried to run away from home and even stole her father's car several times. Andy also suspects that she may be using illegal substances. Concerned about her behavior, he believes that strict rules need to be put in place to deal with the situation. Andy's relatives claim that this was not an act of self-defense, but rather a brutal and calculated murder by Mindy. They allege that she killed her father, a man who did everything in his power to keep his daughter out of trouble. Joni reported that Andy had blocked Mindy's phone. This was because Mindy had been calling her friends frequently, often planning to run away. He later discovered that Mindy had been skipping work, which led him to periodically check her car's mileage to ensure she did not lose her job at McDonald's. Andy also began searching her room after suspecting that she was smoking. Based on these actions, Andy's behavior appeared consistent with that of a controlling yet concerned parent. In the months leading up to the murder, Joni kept a diary documenting many of Mindy's disturbing behaviors. Mindy was described as a rule breaker. Joni's diary recorded every attempt Mindy made to run away, which had happened 3 times in the past 2 months. The diary also described how Mindy spent days lying in bed, drinking, and being dishonest. Because of this behavior, her loved ones found it impossible to trust her. According to Joni, Mindy's behavior was so out of control that Joni feared for her own safety. She overheard Mindy say things to her father that made her feel extremely insecure. This behavior continued for years. According to Joni, Andy only lost his temper once. On that occasion, he grabbed Mindy by the neck and pushed her against a wall. However, it was clear that he had no intention of harming her. Joni categorically denied that there was any abuse toward Mindy. She also stated that she never heard Andy insult his daughter, call her worthless, emotionally pressure her, or humiliate her, as Mindy had described. Joni was home when Andy died. She noticed that Mindy was acting strangely throughout the day but did not think much of it. Everything changed when Joni heard a loud bang. She immediately ran downstairs and saw Mindy pointing a gun at her. Joni quickly retrieved the gun, and no one was hurt. At first, she thought Mindy was just trying to get attention. However, when she went into the kitchen, Joni saw Andy lying on the floor near the entrance through the open door. She called out to him, but he did not respond. When she got closer, she realized he was dead. Mindy killed her father, whom she had hated for years, seemingly without any particular reason. Joni claimed that Andy had always tried to support and protect Mindy from the hardships of life. When the police arrived at the scene, they arrested Mindy and took her to the sheriff's office, where she tearfully confessed to the murder. At the police station, Joni stated that the act was intentional. She believed Mindy was manipulative and untrustworthy. The lawyers sought to damage Andy's reputation, as it was the only way to prove Mindy's innocence. From the beginning, Joni believed that Mindy was trying to deceive everyone to avoid responsibility for her terrible crime. However, the lawyers argued that Mindy had suffered years of emotional and physical abuse and only acted in self-defense when she felt her life and the life of her unborn child was in danger. Mindy, who had recently found out she was pregnant, was terrified, believing that her father would kill her if he found out. Mindy's strongest supporter remained her mother, Shirley. The prosecution presented a wealth of evidence, including a poem found in Mindy's notebook, which had been discovered in her nightstand. The poem described the murder and was accompanied by a small drawing of a bleeding heart being stabbed with a knife. According to the prosecution, this suggested that Mindy had carefully planned the crime. The prosecution argued that when Mindy took the weapon from her father's room, she did not intend to kill herself. Instead, They claimed that she had taken the weapon and ambushed her father. Forensic scientists determined that Andy had been shot in the back with a shotgun, refuting the claim that he had attacked first. He could not have attacked with his back turned. A neighbor testified on behalf of the prosecution, stating that he was about 40 yards from the house when Andy opened the door. The neighbor said everything was quiet, and he did not hear Andy swearing or making threats, contrary to Mindy's claim. According to the neighbor, Andy simply walked into the house, and 10 seconds later, gunshots rang out. The defense attorneys argued that Mindy had been overwhelmed and scared for her life, and that she had acted in self-defense as she prepared to become a mother at a young age. The defense presented a key witness, Mindy's mother, Shirley, who described Andy as a cruel and abusive manipulator who had mistreated her and her older sons. Shirley explained that Andy would force the family to sit at the kitchen table for hours, humiliating and insulting them while clearly enjoying their discomfort. She noted that throughout their marriage, Mindy had been spared from these attacks only because she was so young at the time. However, after Shirley left, Andy's anger turned toward his daughter. Things changed when Mindy turned 15 and called Shirley for the first time, saying she could no longer tolerate Andy's bullying behavior. During this time, Mindy's mental state became extremely concerning. She was admitted to a clinic, where she was diagnosed with depression and had attempted suicide. She stayed there for 9 days, was given medication, and was discharged after her condition was deemed stable. However, her father's pressure and abuse continued. According to Mindy, this caused her to develop paranoia. She felt trapped, like a prisoner in her own home, unable to escape her overbearing father. To cope with her fear and pain, she began drinking and smoking marijuana. This behavior eventually attracted the attention of social services. However, it was Andy who contacted them, hoping to address what he described as Mindy's disturbing behavior. Andy was surprised when Laura Alvarado, a child abuse investigator, sided with Mindy after speaking with her. Laura believed that Mindy was not being defiant or out of control. Instead, it appeared that the teenager was feeling anxious and threatened at home. Mindy had pleaded for help, even expressing a desire to move into a foster home to escape her father. She also revealed that her mother had refused to take her in, unwilling to intervene because of the custody agreement. To Laura, this seemed less like the behavior of a rebellious teenager and more like a child who felt trapped and hopeless. Laura had several conversations with Mindy, but during their last meeting, something seemed different and more troubling. Mindy appeared closed off and unwilling to open up. Laura suspected that Andy had threatened her, but further investigation revealed no solid evidence. The most anticipated part of the hearing was Mindy's testimony in her own defense. This was a high-risk strategy, as it could either persuade the jury to sympathize with her or push them in the opposite direction. The outcome depended entirely on whether the jury believed her. Initially, Mindy's attorney decided to take the gamble, arguing that only Mindy could prove who was telling the truth and who was lying. However, the odds were clearly against her. Ultimately, the defense counsel advised taking a safer route. Mindy agreed to a plea bargain, which resulted in a reduced sentence of 20 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 10 years. Soon after, the situation changed. At age 20, Mindy had already served 4 years in prison and was now focused on seeking justice and regaining her freedom. During this time, the legal system had recognized mental distress as a valid defense, even in murder cases. This change provided a new perspective for Mindy's attorney. An appeal was filed and eventually accepted. However, the appeal came with significant risks. If the jury rejected Mindy's testimony, she could face life in prison, with a minimum of 33 years before she could apply for early release. Despite the high stakes, Mindy was determined to fight to clear her name. Both the prosecution and defense returned to present their cases, as they had during the first trial. Andy's wife, Joni, continued to grieve the loss of her husband and remained determined to prove that Mindy was responsible. At trial, Mindy recounted her traumatic experiences of enduring years of physical abuse at the hands of Andy. She described how he threatened her daily, constantly demeaning and humiliating her for seemingly trivial reasons. Desperate to avoid her father, she tried to limit contact, but living in the same house made that nearly impossible. Even brief encounters often escalated into conflicts and confrontations. The prosecutor's office repeated the arguments they had made during the first hearing. Mindy explained that she had chosen the bathroom to end her life, but she hesitated and was unable to go through with it. She discovered she was pregnant and felt a sense of responsibility for her unborn child. For an hour, she struggled with whether to live or die until she heard her father return home. At that moment, she realized she had lost the chance to return the gun to his room without being discovered. Mindy knew her father would be furious if he found out about her plan. Overcome with fear and emotional distress, she decided to protect herself and her child at all costs. Mindy also explained why she shot her father in the back. She said she had told him to check his answering machine, hoping to distract him while she quietly returned the gun to his room. But as she walked into the kitchen, she saw him begin to turn around and noticed the shotgun. Panicked and believing he was about to lunge at her, she pulled the trigger. The jury heard conflicting accounts. Andy's wife, Joni, and a nearby neighbor claimed there were no signs of a struggle or any screams for help, further suggesting that the killing was premeditated rather than an act of self-defense. At the hearing, an anonymous source revealed that a juror was biased. The juror had traveled from another state, motivated by Mindy's story. As a result, a new hearing was scheduled with a different jury. This time, the defense presented a new witness, Mindy's treating physician during her first hospitalization for depression and end-life thoughts. The physician confirmed that Mindy was severely depressed and exhibited clear signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. She would flinch at the sound of any noise or footsteps. The psychiatrist supported Mindy's testimony that she had been humiliated and tortured by her father. Under the circumstances, her actions in self-defense seemed understandable, especially as she feared for her life and the safety of her child. Both sides presented strong arguments. However, the prosecutor's office held back a critical move. They introduced their own psychiatrist, who strongly disagreed with the conclusions of Mindy's treating doctor. Mindy faced a significant setback when her brother disputed claims of domestic violence in the home, allegations often made by both her mother and Mindy. Ultimately, after 24 hours of deliberation, the jury found Mindy Bereniite guilty of murdering her father. She was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 23 years. Mindy's lawyers were shocked by the outcome, as they had not anticipated such a harsh sentence. The fate of Mindy's child remains unknown. In an earlier interview, Mindy admitted she knew her actions were wrong but insisted that desperation and fear drove her to kill her father, whom she described as a tyrant. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of April Holt. By the summer of 2023, April Holt, a mother of two and a positive thinking coach, had gained over 200,000 followers on TikTok. She building her online reputation on optimism and stories of overcoming adversity. She often encouraged her followers with the mantra, "Keep growing, keep manifesting, and you will succeed." Tragically, at the end of July, April was discovered unconscious in her bathroom and passed away a few days later. While the police classified it as either an accident or self-harm, April's mother, Jamie, held a different belief and began advocating for justice. In early July 2023, April celebrated her 29th birthday, reflecting on her accomplishments at such a young age. As an independent eyelash extension technician, she had left her previous job to start her own business and work for herself. On her birthday, she expressed gratitude, stating, "Happy 29th birthday to me. I am so grateful for the opportunity to live another year, for 10,585 days of life." Among her many achievements, April cherished her family the most, especially her children. She was a devoted and loving mother, sharing snippets of their family life on TikTok. Her videos emphasized positivity, spiritual growth. She inspired her followers by saying, "Sending good energy to everyone who sees this. I wish you a productive day. Be goal-oriented and grow." Occasionally, her videos were simply light-hearted and entertaining. Over the years, April shared personal experiences, including her time as a homeschooled child, which left her with painful memories of social isolation that she eventually overcame. She and her husband, Donovan Holt, who was 33 years old, openly discussed the highs and lows of their marriage. They started as friends, then became best friends, lovers, and ultimately husband and wife, welcoming their daughter and son. Their relationship faced several challenges, such as a period of separation, financial struggles, depression, and serious health issues. Despite these obstacles, April always focused on the positives, portraying their journey as one of resilience and triumph through love. On the morning of July 28, April called her mother to confirm plans for a trip to see a movie, but the plans changed, and she suggested they meet at church the following day. Later that day, however, her mother received a call from Donovan, who reported that his son had found April unconscious in the bathroom. She had a plastic bag tightly wrapped around her head. April's mother, Jamie, noticed that Donovan was behaving oddly. He seemed to lack the deep sorrow and confusion expected from someone who had just lost a spouse. He allowed April's mother to make all decisions regarding her treatment while doctors worked to save her life. Meanwhile, Donovan sat with his head in his hands, rocking back and forth. After 3 days of fighting for her life, April did not regain consciousness and was declared dead by doctors on July 31st. An autopsy report released in November identified suffocation as the cause of death. However, the Nashville police found no evidence of foul play and classified her death as an accident. They informed Jamie that the case was closed, but Jamie refused to accept this conclusion. She vowed to continue investigating to uncover the truth. 2 weeks before her death, April had filed for divorce. This was not the first crisis in their marriage. The couple had previously faced difficulties and lived apart for several years. Although they had separated, they had not finalized their divorce. They maintained a friendly and warm image on social media, which may have been partly genuine, or perhaps they were caught in an unhealthy cycle, as they decided to give their relationship another chance after a long break. In their videos, they often spoke about the importance of forgiveness, open communication, and mutual support. However, the struggles in their marriage were never shared on their TikTok pages. After many years together, April was determined to leave Donovan this time and told her mother that she would not return to him. Donovan seemed to grasp the situation, as Jamie later discovered that a week before April's death, he pawned his wedding ring. There had been a fight between April and Donovan, but the specifics of the argument were unclear. Later, April's son told his grandmother about that tragic day, July 29th. He recalled that April woke up as usual, had coffee, wrote in her journal, enjoyed the calm of the morning, played with him, kissed both him and his father, and then went into the bathroom. He heard the argument escalate and pressed his ear to the bathroom door, noticing their feet beneath it. He tried to make sense of their words but couldn't hear anything, so he ran back to his room. After a while, his father came to him, dressed him, fed him, and told him to come when they called for the ambulance. April was taken to the hospital, but she was no longer breathing. The doctors informed the family that there was no blood circulation in her brain and that her brain was not functioning. On July 31, 2023, April was declared dead, prompting Jamie to fight for justice and bring attention to the case from the Nashville police and prosecutor's office. She launched her own campaign, reaching out to local news stations and celebrities while actively sharing updates on social media. This journey was challenging since the case had already been closed, making it difficult to attract media coverage. Despite major news outlets halting their reporting, Jamie persevered with her online campaign. Jamie obtained full access to the case and initiated her own investigation by filing a formal complaint with the Nashville Community Oversight Board. As a result, April's case was reviewed, and 4 months later, the Nashville police conducted a second investigation. Although this re-investigation did not alter the case classification or the official cause of April's death, it provided Jamie with valuable details to analyze. She meticulously studied the report day and night, searching for any clues. During this time, Jamie also focused on creating a stable and supportive environment for her grandchildren. Jamie openly discussed her pain and authored a book about her healing journey. Jamie became a strong advocate against domestic violence, highlighting how aggression can manifest in unexpected ways. After his wife's death, Donovan Holt moved to Texas and wanted his son to live with him. However, his son pleaded with his grandmother to allow him to stay, promising to do everything he could to remain by his grandmother's side. Jamie stressed that she does not influence her children's feelings and always aims to give them the freedom to choose where they want to be happy. She also wanted her grandchildren to stay together. Unfortunately, Jamie's relationship with her ex-son-in-law quickly deteriorated. In April 2024, she stopped posting about the case, explaining that she had been placed under a gag order. Despite this pause in her online advocacy, Jamie continued to seek justice for her daughter. Investigators initially stated that April had no visible injuries suggesting violence. However, Jamie observed significant bruises and marks on April's body while in the hospital, indicating otherwise. The autopsy report revealed marks on her neck, thighs, and ankles, along with a deep cut on the inner side of her thigh. Crucially, there was only one set of fingerprints found on the bag that was placed over April's head and on the tape that secured it. These fingerprints did not belong to April, they were identified as belonging to Donovan Holt. In September, Jamie confronted Donovan with the findings from her investigation. He admitted to committing the crime. Jamie wasn't shocked, she had known the truth. Following his confession, she took a recording of their conversation to the police, which led to the reopening of April's case. The previous conclusion was re-evaluated, and April's death was officially reclassified. On September 19, 2024, the police announced that Donovan Holt was arrested in San Antonio after confessing to a detective that he killed April Holt. A grand jury charged him with manslaughter, tampering with evidence, and perjury. He was moved from Texas to Nashville, where he was held on a $75,000 bond awaiting a hearing set for October 23. After discussions with the cold case investigation team in Nashville, all uncertainties regarding the case were clarified. Donovan Holt, 33, repeated to the police the same story he had told Jamie. During an argument, he choked April out of anger. To hide what he had done, he moved her to the shower, put a bag over her head, and secured it with tape. Then he went to make lunch for his son. It was only after his son finished eating that he asked their son to check on April and call for an ambulance. April's children are currently living with their grandmother, who reports that they are managing as best as they can, experiencing both difficult days and some slightly better ones. Jamie has expressed her gratitude to her social media followers for their support during this challenging time. Her struggle is far from over, as she is now working to upgrade the charges against Donovan from manslaughter to first-degree murder. With Donovan Holt awaiting trial, Jamie remains committed to seeking justice for her daughter. She insists that this case receives the attention it deserves until all facts and evidence are thoroughly examined, the crime against her daughter is fully understood. Her strength and relentless determination inspire those around her. Each day, more people are rallying to support Jamie, her grandchildren, including friends, acquaintances, and even strangers. On social media, in the news, and at public events, there is a growing conversation about the importance of speaking out and protecting loved ones. Jamie frequently shares her thoughts with her followers, emphasizing that her fight is not just for her daughter but for everyone who has suffered from cruelty and injustice. She hopes her story will resonate with other families who have experienced loss, highlight the importance of perseverance. April, Jamie believes, lives on in the hearts of her children and everyone she inspired with her positivity. Now, Jamie embodies this fight and shines as a light that cannot be dimmed. The day will come when Jamie, knowing that justice has prevailed. With deep sorrow for her child, Jamie will say, "You are not only my beloved daughter, you are a symbol of strength, resilience, and love. Your memory will continue to inspire others." Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Sungnam Kwan Lisowski. Our story today focuses on the Lisowski family. John and his wife Sungnam, along with their two daughters, Victoria and Christine, live in a town called Aurora in the United States. John's job requires frequent international travel, including trips to Korea, as the company's headquarters are in the United States while some factories are located in other countries. During one of these trips to Korea, John met Sungnam Kwan. He quickly fell in love with her and asked her out. After several dates, they decided to get married. They married in 1983 and moved to the United States. Their first daughter, Victoria, was born in 1988, followed by Christine a few years later. Although the family seemed perfect, some people found Sungnam too strict with the children. For a long time, John reassured himself that the strict nature of Asian parenting was normal, attributing it to his wife's cultural background. However, as tensions mounted, he began to realize that something was wrong. Sungnam's expectations of the children were too high, too strict, and sometimes even harsh. John's displeasure did not affect Sungnam much. She continued to impose more rules and insisted on their strict enforcement. Notably, the children were forbidden to discuss their family with anyone outside, even their friends. Meanwhile, Victoria and Christine socialized with friends and occasionally visited their homes. During these visits, they found that their friends' parents treated them much more kindly and warmly than the constant criticism they faced at home. While their friends' mothers would bake with them on the weekends, Victoria and Christine's mother decided on their interests without ever consulting them. Every weekend, she woke Victoria and Christine up at 6 a.m. and forced them to practice the piano, scolding them even if they made the slightest mistake. If they messed up, she would hit their hands. Victoria and Christine were never praised. Even if they played perfectly, there was no encouragement. Eventually, Sungnam had to use a wooden stick to discipline them. If they relaxed for a moment or hunched over, they would be beaten by her. John disagreed with this method of education. However, Sungnam achieved results. Victoria and Christine quickly mastered the piano, began to participate in competitions, and even won awards. However, deep down, they did not find joy in their achievements. Sungnam convinced John that her goal was to raise gifted children and that this harsh approach was necessary. Sungnam had a hot temper and would quickly lose control, leading to dangerous behavior. This created a tense atmosphere in the family, where even John felt uncomfortable around her. Sungnam firmly established her dominance in the family and made all the decisions. She often intervened in conflicts, even when she was not directly involved, relishing the role of judge. This situation took place during a conflict between Christine and Victoria. The two children were arguing about something trivial. Christine quickly apologized, but Victoria, the older sister, did not accept it. This made Sungnam unable to bear it. Ignoring Victoria and Christine's feelings, Sungnam became angry. She stood up, walked past Victoria, and began to punish Christine. Christine was confused and did not understand why she was being beaten. Sungnam hit her so violently that Christine's face was left bloody as she slid down the wall, unable to get up. Victoria watched in horror and began to scream an apology, begging her mother to stop. The beating only ceased when Victoria screamed. Sun Nam then turned to Victoria and warned her that if she disobeyed again, Christine would be punished. She made it clear that she would hurt little Christine every time Victoria defied Sun Nam, ensuring that Victoria would feel guilty about it. Many may wonder why John, the father of the children, did not step in to stop his wife and help his daughters. The truth is that John could not influence his wife, he was also the target of her anger. At the time of this incident, John was working late at the office, trying to avoid the increasingly tense atmosphere at home. This distance made it difficult for him to be involved in his children's lives. By the time John realized that the situation had escalated beyond normal limits, it was too late to intervene. While he was at work, his children were suffering from constant abuse at the hands of their mother. She often assaulted them. John was also involved in a number of disturbing incidents. On one occasion, Victoria went to a friend's house after school. There were obvious injuries on her body, and many suspected that something was wrong in her family, but Victoria remained silent. While she was at her friend's house, the phone rang, and Victoria was called home because something had happened. Victoria braced herself and returned to her house. As she approached, she saw her father standing at the door, talking to the police. He had a large, fresh bruise and a cut on his cheek that looked quite frightening. Victoria overheard her father's conversation with the police. He was making excuses, insisting that he had just fallen and that there was nothing to worry about. However, Victoria understood the truth of the situation. It was clear that after the initial violence, her father had tried to confront his wife to protect the children. Unfortunately, he was severely beaten, and Sun Nam even threatened him with a knife. Since then, she had completely dominated the family. John was too afraid to speak up because he feared for his own safety. Sun Nam's violent outbursts were terrifying. All the family members tried to keep their distance from her. John spent more time at work, trying to stay away from home as much as possible. He built a successful career, becoming the director of a telecommunications equipment company, and often traveled for work. Victoria and Christine followed suit, spending more time at school or with friends to avoid being at home. This situation continued until Victoria and Christine entered high school. During this time, the distance between John and Sun Nam grew. He began working longer hours, taking extra shifts, and often left the house before everyone else woke up. He would wake up early and come home later than everyone else. Unfortunately, Victoria and Christine could not escape this situation. They were still stuck in a stressful environment with their demanding mother. During this time, the cruelty towards Victoria and Christine escalated significantly. One day, an argument broke out between the two sisters. Their mother, Sun Nam, intervened by locking her daughters in a stuffy, dark garage. She forced them to sit with their hands raised for hours. When she finally opened the door, she found Victoria and Christine exhausted from the heat, but Sun Nam chose not to let them out. Instead, she refused to give them water and simply closed the door again. It was later revealed that she had gone to the store, leaving her children in that miserable situation. Victoria and Christine sat for hours in the sweltering heat, feeling miserable but too afraid to go outside, knowing that it would only make their mother angrier. One day, while driving down the street, she lost control of the car, causing Victoria and Christine to bang on the door from the inside. They were confused by their mother's actions. Passers-by noticed her driving erratically, and when they approached, she claimed that the children were late for the bus, justifying her reckless speed. Witnesses described her as unstable, with wild eyes. In addition, Sun Nam flaunted her wealth to make those around her jealous, even though she did not work. All her spending was done with John's money and credit. Sun Nam lost control of her finances to the point that John's steady salary was no longer sufficient. The situation became serious when they faced eviction due to unpaid utility bills and mortgage payments. Despite this threat, Sung Nam had no intention of stopping her spending habits. She continued to buy expensive items and frequented the city's posh clubs. John was unaware of the accumulated debts until it was too late. Sung Nam adopted a reckless lifestyle, spending her evenings at clubs while neglecting her children. When the threat of eviction became a reality, John could no longer bear the situation and made accusations against his wife. This caused her to react violently, leading to heated arguments that eventually escalated into physical violence. She hit John several times, forcing him to retreat to avoid hurting her. Despite his efforts to calm her down, she continued to attack him. In response, he grabbed her arm to restrain her until she calmed down, leaving marks on her wrist. Seeing the situation, Sung Nam decided to call the police. She claimed that her husband was abusing her. She misrepresented the facts, insisting that John had attacked her and that she had to endure constant verbal abuse and violence from him. Sung Nam continued to portray John as abusive and threatening. Finally, Victoria could no longer remain silent and informed the police that her mother had lied. She gave a truthful account of what had happened, as she had witnessed the entire conflict. Victoria explained that her mother had thrown the first punch, and even when John tried to calm her down, Sung Nam continued to act aggressively and threateningly. Faced with these conflicting stories, the police could only leave, suggesting that the family resolve the matter themselves. After the incident, nothing changed. Sung Nam continued to spend the money her husband earned. When John found out about this, he was furious and decided to confront her over the phone. Before the call, he had blocked her access to their accounts. During the conversation, Sung Nam lied and argued. He did not realize the potential consequences of his actions. When Sung Nam discovered that John had blocked her access to all of their accounts, she stormed into his office with a knife, threatened him, and cornered him. Faced with the threat of violence and with his children witnessing the chaos, John felt compelled to unlock the card. After this incident, John threw himself into work, taking more business trips to avoid his wife. To manage the expenses for the children and household bills, he was often away from home. In the fall of 2002, John went on a short business trip to China. During this trip, he met another woman and fell in love with her. John began looking for every opportunity to return to China to be with her and intended to divorce Sung Nam. On September 5, 2002, he emailed Sung Nam to inform her that he wanted a divorce. Although he had been struggling to fulfill his responsibilities as a father, he now wanted to take their children to China to be with his new girlfriend. He had a clear advantage over Sung Nam in that he had a stable income, while she did not. As a result, the ideal life she had tried to portray began to crumble. Sung Nam called John to discuss their personal problems. She was furious after receiving his message, and the news of his decision to divorce shocked her. He confirmed that he intended to initiate divorce proceedings as soon as he returned from his business trip. Sung Nam angrily threw the phone at Victoria, saying that their father wanted to take her and her sister to China. Victoria remained calm, picked up the phone, and told her father that this was a great plan, as living with their mother was unbearable. She expressed her eagerness to leave home and waited for her father to return. Sung Nam was acutely aware of the difficult situation around her. During the Christmas holiday of 2002, John returned from a business trip. At that time, Victoria was 14 years old, and her sister Christine was 12. John was 46 years old, and Sung Nam was 41. While everything seemed to be falling apart, Sung Nam noticed that everyone else was in a good mood. Despite being very angry, Sung Nam did not create any conflicts, which made Victoria and Christine feel uneasy. On the contrary, John appreciated the quiet atmosphere. When John returned from China, Sung Nam had completely changed. She prepared gifts for the whole family, dressed neatly, and decorated the house. She began serving drinks, creating a pleasant atmosphere. Sun Nam placed glasses for everyone and then stepped away to continue washing dishes. Victoria and Christine noticed something white at the bottom of their drinks but did not have time to warn their father before he finished drinking. Realizing that something was wrong, Victoria and Christine pretended to drink but secretly discarded their drinks. When Sun Nam left the room, they noticed that John seemed sluggish after drinking. He said he felt tired and went upstairs to sleep. Although Victoria and Christine had only taken a few sips, they also felt weak. They fell asleep until 8 a.m. the next day, December 25, 2002. Christine and Victoria woke up feeling unwell, not remembering how they had gotten to bed, but at first, there was nothing alarming. Victoria suspected that her mother had put sleeping pills in their drinks, although the reason was unclear. She felt relieved to wake up and find herself alive. Victoria and Christine decided to go downstairs to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. However, before they could leave the room, they heard a loud noise from the first floor that sounded like a gunshot. Earlier that morning, Sun Nam had sneaked into John's office, where he was working. She shot him once in the head from behind and then shot him 3 times in the back. Afterward, she went upstairs and stopped at the door. Victoria and Christine were horrified to see her reloading the gun. Sun Nam begged for forgiveness, saying that she had to do it, then pointed the gun at Victoria. There were 7 bullets left in the magazine. Christine, who had been frozen in shock, suddenly regained her composure. Seizing the moment, she grabbed the phone and called the police. Christine could wait for the operator to answer while Sun Nam reloaded. Christine tried to tell the police that there was a shooting in the house and provided the address. Soon, the police heard a series of gunshots as the call continued. Christine had to run away to escape her mother, who was about to shoot her. She ran into Victoria's bedroom just seconds before her mother opened fire. Christine was injured, but against all odds, both she and Victoria survived. She locked the door and waited for rescue, praying that her mother could not get in. Meanwhile, the patrol officers arrived at the house in emergency mode. Within minutes, they parked outside and heard several gunshots from inside, followed by silence. Unsure of what was happening, the officers cautiously entered the house with their weapons drawn. Inside, they first found John, who had been shot multiple times. Sun Nam shot himself behind a locked door, and she is unconscious. They also discovered Victoria and Christine, wounded but fortunately still alive. All 3 of them were rushed to the hospital. They were seriously injured and needed immediate medical attention. As they began to recover, the police interviewed them to gather information about the shooting. Sun Nam was in worse condition, but Victoria and Christine seemed to have little concern for her. On September 5, 2002, Sun Nam applied for a gun license. It took some time, but by December 17, she had legally obtained a pistol. Over the next week, she practiced target shooting diligently. This preparation suggested that the crime had been planned in advance. Sun Nam confided in her friends about her hatred for her husband and even mentioned her intention to buy a weapon to kill him. However, her friends considered Sun Nam's comments to be expressions of anger and did not believe that she would actually carry out her threat. The attack and Sun Nam's parenting made her friends key witnesses for the prosecution. Their testimony shocked both the jury and the experienced police officers. Sun Nam was sent for a psychiatric evaluation, which determined that she was fit to stand trial. The prosecution argued that Sun Nam had carefully planned the murder and attempted to kill her entire family, proving that she had intent and was of sound mind. Ultimately, Sun Nam Kwan Lisowski was convicted of premeditated murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 45 years. Victoria and Christine were sent to live with their aunt and uncle. Throughout her incarceration, Sun Nam continued to misbehave and denied all charges against her. In 2008, Sun Nam confessed to her actions, saying that she could not accept the idea of divorce and was desperate to keep her husband, who had chosen to be with another woman. She admitted that she had tried to harm her children because she could not bear the thought of a stepmother caring for them. Sadly, in 2008, Sun Nam took her own life while in prison. Victoria and Christine wrote to her, hoping for a future reunion, but that day never came. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of John Sweeney. John Sweeney was born on October 13, 1956. He grew up with an older brother and an older sister. People familiar with John's family described his father as a cruel and controlling man. From an early age, John was subjected to his father's strictness and was often the target of physical punishment. Psychologists later identified these harsh experiences as a major factor contributing to John's challenges as an adult. Despite their difficult living environment, John's family was close-knit and working class. His father instilled values of assertiveness and resilience in his sons. However, his methods were harsh, and he may have passed on his authoritarian attitude toward women to John, teaching him that women should always be submissive. Despite these hardships, John developed a strong passion for painting from an early age. At 15, he dreamed of attending art school, but his family did not support his aspirations. Instead, he studied carpentry and specialized in woodworking. This career path left John with a lingering sense of frustration, as he was unable to pursue his true ambitions and was forced to follow a different path in life. John had problems with the police from an early age. As a teenager, he displayed extremely violent tendencies, which led to a number of disturbing incidents. He frequently exhibited aggressive and violent behavior, often targeting his friends. One reported incident involved John getting into a dangerous fight while in high school at a nearby store where he was buying chips. Despite still being a minor, he picked up an axe and swung it aggressively. Witnesses said that, fortunately, no one was injured in the incident. The reckless teenager faced no serious consequences and was only given a warning by the police. By 1974, John had decided to marry. His wife, Anne Bramley, was his neighbor. Together, John and Anne had 2 children, a son and a daughter. Despite Anne's hopes that marriage and family life would calm him down, John remained ruthless, and nothing seemed to change his erratic nature. John's violent outbursts were especially severe when he was drunk, and revealed that he often harmed her pets to intimidate her and escalated conflicts by throwing bricks through windows, causing significant property damage. He repeatedly accused her of infidelity, even though she was faithful and gave him no reason to suspect her. Ironically, John himself had no qualms about pursuing romantic relationships with other women. According to family acquaintances, John treated his girlfriends as if they were his property. His first wife, Anne, experienced this firsthand. She described John Sweeney as sweet and charming until his mood changed. When this happened, he would focus on small issues, becoming aggressive and cruel. In these moments, he would easily explode and seem to invent reasons to justify his anger when none existed. After enduring this behavior for 5 years, Anne decided to file for divorce in 1979. However, like many manipulators, John tried everything to convince her to reconcile. Surprisingly, his efforts worked, and the couple remarried in 1981. During this time, John was able to control his behavior, leading Anne to believe that he had truly changed. Unfortunately, this did not last. Soon after they remarried, John's aggressive and uncontrollable behavior returned, and domestic violence once again became a regular occurrence. Before their relationship ended, they experienced another violent incident. One evening, John got drunk and attacked Anne. This event led her to make a firm decision to leave him and not attempt to mend the relationship. However, true to the behavior of a manipulator, John did not let go easily. Viewing his wife as his possession, John began stalking her. After and moved into a new house, an incident occurred while she was visiting a neighbor in the apartment next door. Through the wall, and heard suspicious noises coming from her apartment. She suspected it could either be John with malicious intentions or a burglar breaking in. Both possibilities seemed dangerous. Not wanting to take any chances, and called the police. When they arrived, the officers escorted her back to her apartment and searched the premises for any threats. Suddenly, John emerged from the closet, holding clothes in one hand and an axe and a knife in the other. He appeared startled to see the police and claimed he had planned to surprise his ex-wife. However, and believed he had brought the weapons with the intent to harm her, possibly even to kill her, as she had finally escaped his control. Unsurprisingly, the police did not believe John's story about the surprise and arrested him. However, he was later released without charges because he had not harmed anyone and was technically in his own apartment. The police only secured a verbal promise from him to stay away from Anne. After the divorce was finalized, Anne left with her children, moved away, and went into hiding to escape her dangerous ex-husband. Eventually, John gave up pursuing her. He decided it was time to change his life, leaving the city and embarking on a tour around Europe in hopes of forgetting his troubled past. He began searching for work abroad, believing he could find better opportunities and earn more money. Finding temporary jobs abroad was not difficult for John, but he never stayed in one place for long. He traveled to Germany and France before eventually settling in the Netherlands. Further investigations did not uncover any evidence of assaults on women during these trips. While abroad, John returned to his old habits, searching for a woman he could marry. However, his efforts were unsuccessful, and he was eventually forced to return to his homeland. Interestingly, upon his return, John rediscovered his passion for painting. Experts later analyzed his artwork and attributed its themes to his criminal nature. His paintings were gruesome, often violent and bloody, depicting brutal scenes. However, at the time, they were dismissed as mere works of art. Later, John made a living as a carpenter, taking on repair and construction jobs. He eventually settled in London, where he met Melissa Halstead, a model and photographer. She had hired him to do repairs on a film set. Melissa was an incredibly beautiful woman, and John seemed to take an immediate interest in her. Originally from Ohio, USA, Melissa had moved to another country in Europe, where she felt lonely and had few social connections. She was unaware of John's violent past. John quickly regained his charm, and after visiting her on set a few times, he suggested they meet. This marked the beginning of their romantic relationship. At first, Melissa described their relationship as warm and loving, reflecting John's manipulative behavior. Over time, they began living together. Less than a year later, John attacked her for the first time. Before this, he had repeatedly broken her self-esteem and cheated on her, leaving her feeling completely hopeless. Her career began to suffer, and her family back in Ohio recognized the toxicity of the relationship. Both her mother and sister urged Melissa to leave John as soon as possible. About a year after they met, Melissa's sister visited her in England. While staying at Melissa and John's apartment, she discovered banned substance and some disturbing artwork that John had created. She was shocked by what she saw. Before leaving, Melissa's sister begged her to end the relationship immediately. Despite this, Melissa chose to stay with John. In 1987, John committed his first violent attack on Melissa, which led to legal trouble. He was cautioned twice for his violent behavior. On one occasion, John threw a chair at Melissa, injuring both her legs. On another occasion, he punched her in the face. However, both times he only received verbal warnings and small fines. At the time, British authorities had a lenient attitude towards domestic violence. In the summer of 1988, John decided to move to Austria, and Melissa went with him. Initially, the move seemed to benefit their relationship. They reconnected and experienced a period without violence. During this time, things went well. They both made good money, and Melissa's modeling career began to take off again. She traveled frequently for work, and they could now afford to rent an apartment in central Vienna. However, their relationship soon fell apart. One evening, John's violent nature resurfaced, and he attacked Melissa with a hammer. She was taken to the hospital with a fractured skull. It seems that John harbored resentment towards her and became increasingly obsessed with his art. Psychologists later analyzed his artwork and concluded that it reflected his inner turmoil and violent worldview. Unfortunately, at the time these drawings appeared, no one paid much attention to John or recognized the warning signs. The haunting images clearly showed his desire to kill. While John was in prison, Melissa was recovering from the attack. Despite everything, she no longer resented John and even began to miss him. In February 1989, she appealed to the Austrian legal system, asking the court to pardon John. Under Austrian law, she had the right to do so. Her appeal was successful. Melissa withdrew her statement about the attack, and John was released after serving only 6 months. However, the police ordered John to leave Austria. Despite this, Melissa chose to follow him. They settled in Amsterdam together. In Amsterdam, John and Melissa rented an apartment in the city center, worked, and used a rental car. Their home was located near the train station. In November 1989, Melissa called her family. Since no one was home, she left a voicemail wishing her loved ones well, expressing her love, and saying that she hoped to see them again soon. After the call, she went on a business trip. In the following months, her family tried to contact her, but they were unable to reach her. At that time, cell phones were not available, making communication even more difficult. John also ignored all calls from Melissa's family. After a while, Melissa, exhausted by the constant conflicts and abuse from John, decided to end their relationship. She confided in her colleagues at work, telling them that if anything happened to her, it would be because of John. Soon after, she disappeared and was never seen alive again. On May 3, 1990, a passerby in Rotterdam noticed a suspicious bag floating in a canal. Upon inspection, the bag was found to contain body parts, although the head and hands were missing. The witness immediately alerted the police. The brutal nature of the crime became evident when the body was examined. What shocked the police most was that the victim's spine had been broken in half, and evidence suggested she had been subjected to prolonged torture designed to inflict extreme pain. After the murder, the perpetrator placed the body in a large black bag, which was then dumped in the canal. At the same time, Melissa's family grew increasingly worried, as they had not heard from her for months. A missing person report had been filed in Amsterdam, but since the Rotterdam police did not have access to it, they were unable to identify the victim. With no leads, the investigation was eventually closed. The unidentified remains were buried in a public cemetery in Rotterdam in an unmarked grave, and the police remained unaware of the victim's identity. John, the killer, escaped justice. By 1991, John had returned to London alone. He never told anyone about what had happened to Melissa. Her family suspected that John was involved in her disappearance, but there was no evidence to prove it. As a result, John continued his life without facing any consequences. At a local pub, John met Delia Balmer, a 40-year-old nurse. Their meeting was initially accidental, but John quickly used his charm to make her fall in love with him. Delia, feeling lonely, invited him to move into her house. John seized the opportunity, helping her with the housework and earning her trust. During this time, he worked as a carpenter, earning a good income by creating furniture and home furnishings. However, over time, John's true nature began to reveal itself. After nearly 2 years together, in December 1993, Delia realized the extent of John's temper and cruelty. She finally asked him to leave. Surprisingly, he did not argue and agreed to move out. However, he did not truly leave her life. John continued to frequent the same shops and bars as Delia, making sure they crossed paths often. Wherever she went, John seemed to appear, controlling and pursuing her relentlessly. He even attempted to re-enter her apartment. In May 1994, Delia went on a short trip around Europe with a friend. When she returned, John was furious that he had temporarily lost control of her. He tracked her down, tied her to the bed, and threatened her with a weapon, intensifying her fear. To further intimidate her, John told her a disturbing story about his previous girlfriend, Melissa. He confessed to killing Melissa, sitting with her body in his apartment for 3 days, and then disposing of her remains by dumping them in a canal in another city. Delia realized she was now trapped with a crazed killer. John demanded her complete obedience, warning her that if she did not comply, she would suffer the same fate as Melissa. Delia endured a week of abuse. During this time, she was repeatedly beaten, assaulted, and threatened with a weapon before finally being released in the summer of 1994. In July, Delia sought refuge at a shelter and reported the abuse to the police. She even showed them John Sweeney's disturbing drawings. However, the police dismissed her concerns, calling them a joke and accusing her of exaggeration. In early November, John left the apartment, and Delia took the opportunity to change the locks. When he returned on November 11th and discovered what she had done, he became furious. Despite locking the door, he managed to break in and attack Delia. The next day, Delia fled to the police station again. The officers escorted her back home, but John had disappeared. However, another attack occurred the following day. This time, Delia's neighbors and friends called the police. The officers arrived just in time, as John was inside the apartment with Delia. She ran out to meet the police, crying and terrified. During a search of the apartment, the police discovered a bag in the bathroom that John had brought with him. Inside the bag were rubber gloves, a mask, some rope, and surgical instruments, items that could be used by a murderer. Despite this alarming discovery, the police dismissed its significance. John was arrested and held for a week before being released on the condition that he return to his parents' home, 300 kilometers away from Delia. This distance was considered safe. But on December 22nd, John violated the terms of his bail by going to Delia's house in the evening. That night, Delia, feeling nervous, used a brick to block the basement door before going downstairs to put her bike away. She kept glancing around cautiously, afraid that John might be nearby. When she turned around, she saw John's familiar face staring at her. Suddenly, he pulled out an axe and swung it at her. She tried to defend herself with a knife, trying to cut his palm. Enraged, John grabbed the knife and attacked her. Delia screamed in pain and desperately used her bike as a shield against his repeated attacks. The commotion attracted the attention of neighbors. A man rushed to help, wielding a baseball bat and confronting John to protect Delia. John struck the neighbor several times before fleeing the scene. Delia was then taken to the hospital in critical condition, where she underwent several emergency operations that ultimately saved her life. The police began pursuing John Sweeney, who had fled. Despite their efforts, he evaded capture and escaped the UK. He remained in hiding for the next 6 years until he returned to the UK in 2000. To avoid detection, he used a false identity. John was highly skilled at altering his appearance, which made it easy for him to avoid detection. He quickly found work on construction sites and often used different fake names to remain unnoticed. After returning to his hometown, he met Paula Fields. Like John's other victims, Paula was lonely and vulnerable. Since they both came from the same area, John was able to establish a relationship with her quickly. Paula had spent most of her life on the streets. It was surprising that John managed to deceive her, as people like Paula, hardened by street life, were often very adept at reading others and recognizing manipulators or abusers. However, John Sweeney was such a skilled manipulator that he succeeded in fooling even someone like her. At first, their relationship seemed calm and romantic, but over time, John began to show signs of dissatisfaction. His frustration escalated into aggression and hostility. In December, John Sweeney committed a brutal crime. He killed Paula, and after handling the body, he placed the parts in separate bags. He disposed of the bags in the London Canal. On February 19, 2001, boys fishing in the canal discovered one of the bags containing Paula's body parts. They immediately contacted the police, who later recovered 5 more bags containing other parts of her remains. Advances in DNA technology helped identify the victim as Paula Fields and revealed a suspicious boyfriend. At the time, John was using an alias. However, further investigation by the police uncovered that her boyfriend's real name was John Sweeney. He was also linked to the murder of Melissa Halstead and was wanted for an attack on Delia Balmer. John became one of Britain's most wanted men. The police eventually tracked John down at a construction site in central London, where he was working. A specialist armed team was deployed to arrest him, as he was known to carry weapons. When apprehended, John did not resist, likely overwhelmed by the presence of heavily armed officers. A subsequent search of his flat uncovered over 300 gruesome works of art and poetry. Some of these artworks contained references to Paula and other victims. John Sweeney was later convicted of the attempted murder of Delia Balmer. On March 5, 2002, he was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after only 9 years. With good behavior, he could have been released even earlier. Delia was deeply unhappy with this outcome. As the police continued to investigate Paula Fields' death, they faced numerous challenges. It took another 6 years. In 2008, they were finally able to match DNA from an unidentified victim found in a Rotterdam canal to Melissa Halstead. This discovery linked John Sweeney to another murder. Delia's testimony, which included his confession, along with the presence of his DNA on Melissa's remains, played a key role in connecting him to this brutal crime. Melissa's murder had taken place more than 20 years earlier. Her family finally learned the truth and sought justice. Despite the evidentiary challenges, the police decided to use John's artwork as admissible evidence. Several of his drawings referenced Melissa's death long before her body was identified. One drawing even depicted a headstone bearing her name, details that only the killer could have known. Nearly 21 years after Melissa's death and 6 years after Paula's murder, the trial for these cases was held on April 4, 2011. John Sweeney was convicted of murder and sentenced to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. This ensures that John will spend the rest of his life in prison. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Graziella Monsi. The Monsi family had an 8-year-old daughter named Graziella Monsi, their only child and a long-awaited member of the family. They are businessmen who cater to tourists and have owned a shop for about 10 years where they sell nuts and dried fruits on the street leading to Castel del Monte. Their shop's prime location brought them steady and substantial income. Despite her young age, Graziella often helped her parents with the business, which made the family proud. Since childhood, she had been involved in their work, bringing energy and enthusiasm to the shop. The location was a bustling tourist area with a constant flow of customers, and her help was invaluable during busy times. Her cheerful and active nature left a lasting impression on customers who shopped there. One Saturday, a peak day for tourists, the Monsi family was hard at work, as weekends were typically their busiest. Graziella's grandfather often helped behind the counter during such busy periods, and she eagerly accompanied him to run small errands. That day, a large number of people came to Castel del Monte, keeping her grandfather busy at the stall, unable to step away. By evening, he grew tired and asked Graziella to go to the nearby fountain to fill a bottle with water. She happily agreed and left for the fountain, just a 5-minute walk away. However, her grandfather soon began to worry when she didn't return promptly. Graziella's grandfather comforted himself by thinking she might have met someone she knew and gotten distracted. However, after more than 20 minutes had passed and she still hadn't returned, he realized something was wrong. Worried, he walked to the fountain to check what might have delayed her. He was astonished to find Graziella nowhere to be seen, either on the road or near the fountain. He searched all the nearby streets carefully but couldn't locate her. Her disappearance seemed suspicious. The grandfather went back to the shop, hoping she might have returned through a different route, but she wasn't there. Roughly half an hour after she vanished, he informed her parents. Together, they began calling her friends and acquaintances, hoping someone had seen her. Sadly, no one they contacted had any information. Meanwhile, Monsi's entire family and some close friends gathered at the square near the store and began organizing a search. Less than an hour after Graziella vanished, the adults and teenagers divided into groups to search for her. The commotion caught the attention of passers-by and some tourists, prompting several volunteers to join the search effort. The Monsi family carried a photo of Graziella, asking anyone they encountered if they had seen her. A few people mentioned seeing a girl who looked like her earlier in the afternoon, but nobody knew where she might be or what had happened. The area was typically peaceful and quiet, making it hard to imagine someone attacking a girl in such a bustling location. After searching unsuccessfully for a few hours, the Monsi family reported Graziella missing at the local police station. The police acted quickly, and soon, the Carabinieri were involved in the search. Later, a witness approached an officer with a disturbing claim. He had heard a child's panicked cry coming from the wooded area near Castel del Monte. 2 police officers immediately went to investigate the location. When they arrived at the forest, they saw smoke rising from a fire. At first, they didn't think it was connected to Graziella's disappearance, but they decided to investigate to better understand the situation. Suspecting it might be a forest fire, they approached cautiously. As they got closer, about 10 meters away, they were hit by a distinct and horrifying smell: burnt flesh. Soon, the officers discovered a fire pit in the woods. In the flames, there were dry leaves burning, and underneath was what looked like a human body. To their horror, the body was child-sized, and the clothing matched the description of the dress Graziella had been wearing that day. The police immediately suspected the remains were hers. The fire had completely consumed her body, and she was found deceased. The area was thoroughly searched, but apart from fragments of Graziella's clothing in a lighter, likely used to start the fire, no other evidence was found to identify the perpetrator. Investigators decided to conduct a more thorough investigation of the area and aimed to collect surveillance footage from nearby cameras. A forensic expert later confirmed the grim discovery: the body was indeed Graziella's. An autopsy revealed that she had been deliberately murdered and burned. News of the incident spread quickly, making headlines the next day. Journalists flocked to Graziella's family, seeking comments on the tragic murder. When her relatives learned the full details of what had happened, they were in utter disbelief. They could not comprehend such a cruel and monstrous act. The entire community was deeply shaken. The media heightened public fear by extensively reporting on the horrific crime near the famous castle. This caused a sharp decline in tourist visits to the town, as people began to view the area as unsafe. The town's reputation as a popular destination suffered greatly, dealing a heavy blow to Andria's tourism industry. People are facing the tragedy and its lasting consequences. Meanwhile, investigators acted swiftly to find the perpetrator. From the very beginning, the police were determined to solve the case. Their primary theory was that a predator had enticed Graziella to leave the bustling tourist area and go to a more secluded location. There, he assaulted her and tried to cover up all evidence of the crime. Authorities initially believed that the attacker was likely an older, calculated, and experienced man. They began their investigation by reviewing a list of known criminals in the area who had criminal records related to abuse. However, as the case unfolded, this theory lost credibility. Investigators also considered the possibility that the perpetrator was a tourist who randomly targeted victims, including Graziella. To explore this, they analyzed tourist movements, but this idea also seemed increasingly improbable over time. As police interviewed witnesses, friends, and acquaintances of the Graziella family, one name kept coming up: Pasquale Tortora. He was a 20-year-old local man who worked illegally as a parking attendant on the same street as the Graziella family shop. Many people had noticed that since Graziella started working at the store, Pasquale had been observing her in a strange and unsettling way. Several individuals mentioned this, and their observations raised suspicions. When the police questioned Pasquale's friends, the concerns deepened. Some of his acquaintances had even joked that he seemed attracted to the 8-year-old girl. However, in the current situation, what had once been considered a harmless joke now carried a much darker implication. Could Pasquale have been a predator obsessed with Graziella? His family firmly denied this possibility, pointing out that he was raised in a respectable household and had no prior trouble with the law, at least, not until the tragic evening near Castel del Monte. However, despite his family's claims, Pasquale quickly became the main suspect. Investigators grew more suspicious after meeting with him. His t-shirt showed suspicious dark red stains, and his clothing was marked with dirt, as if he had been crawling or struggling on the ground. Additionally, his face bore small but clear scratches, resembling marks left by tiny hands in a desperate struggle. Pasquale, of course, denied any involvement in the attack on Graziella. However, during questioning by detectives, his testimony became increasingly inconsistent. He kept changing his story, which led investigators to suspect that he was hiding something. After just a few hours at the police station, Pasquale began to crumble under pressure. He then made a cold remark, stating that he found Graziella very beautiful, even though she was only 8 years old. Initially, he claimed that while walking in the woods, he stumbled upon Graziella's lifeless body already on fire. Frightened, he said he ran away, and the police showed up later. Later, he altered his story. He said he had seen Graziella heading to the fountain to fetch water. Since she knew him and trusted him, she wasn't afraid when he approached her. He emphasized that he had always acted calmly around her up to that point. Pasquale then mentioned that a dog had recently given birth to puppies in the nearby forest and claimed he had offered to show them to Graziella. This seemingly harmless excuse was the moment investigators grasped the horrifying reality of what had taken place. After breaking down completely, Pasquale confessed to his actions. He admitted to luring Graziella into the forest and, after committing the crime, setting her on fire to destroy any evidence. However, he denied intending to abuse her. Instead, he claimed his actions were part of a so-called Cato game, which had escalated beyond his control. The media quickly sensationalized the story, amplifying it with rumors and disturbing details. This overwhelming wave of coverage fueled public confusion. The true motive behind the murder remained unclear, as Pasquale's testimony was riddled with contradictions, leaving many questions unanswered. The police uncovered several inconsistencies in his account. His timeline didn't add up, and his explanations lacked credibility. One fact, however, was undeniable: the fire began around 10 p.m., but Graziella had already been missing for nearly 3 hours. So, what happened during that time frame? Later, Pasquale disclosed a chilling detail: he lit the fire after hearing people nearby in the forest. Believing they were searching for Graziella, he panicked and acted out of fear. However, the most horrifying discovery came from forensic experts. They concluded that she was still alive when the fire was set. Investigators continued to intensify their questioning of Pasquale. A troubling question emerged: how had he managed to commit such a horrific act while escaping with only minor injuries? Could he truly have acted alone? This led authorities to consider the possibility of an accomplice or even multiple accomplices, turning the focus of the investigation in a new direction. The police decided to interrogate Pasquale again. Eventually, he agreed to cooperate, admitting that fear had previously stopped him from revealing the entire truth. In his revised statement, Pasquale claimed that he never intended to harm Graziella himself. Instead, he stated that a group of young men, all aged 18 to 20, had coerced him. Pasquale identified 4 individuals: Michele Zagaria, Giuseppe Di Bari, Domenico Margiotta, and Vincenzo Corritella. He alleged that this group was waiting in the forest. According to him, there was no plan to harm or assault Graziella, but he had lost a bet with them. As a result, they pressured him to lure her into the woods. Pasquale recounted that when Graziella arrived in the forest, the 4 young men attacked her. They stopped her from escaping and forced her into silence. When they heard adults searching for her, they panicked. Fearing legal consequences, they decided to get rid of her. However, they didn't have any fuel to start a fire. Growing desperate, they tried to set her clothes on fire but failed. At one point, Graziella regained consciousness and screamed, prompting them to beat her again until she passed out. They tried to start the fire again, this time covering her body with leaves and using a lighter. The flames finally caught. All 4 young men came from respected families and had no history of violent behavior or serious crimes. Those who knew them described them as calm and well-mannered. Only one of them had a criminal record for a minor theft. Despite Pasquale's testimony, the idea that these 4 young men had decided to burn Graziella alive seemed unimaginable. However, once Pasquale provided their names, the police swiftly arrested them. News of their arrest shocked Italy, with the media covering every detail and fueling public outrage. From the beginning, the 4 suspects denied any involvement in Graziella's death. They claimed they had no idea why they were under investigation. Still, detectives remained determined to interrogate them until they uncovered the full truth about what happened that night. Unlike Pasquale, there was no physical evidence connecting the 4 men to the crime. When police searched their homes, nothing incriminating was found. They did acknowledge that Pasquale had an unhealthy obsession with Graziella, but they strongly denied having any part in her murder. Despite lengthy interrogations, none of the suspects admitted to any involvement. With no solid evidence against them, they were released but remained under close surveillance as the primary suspects. In a chilling development, the same 4 young men were later seen carrying Graziella's coffin at her funeral. Pasquale revealed that they were crying, appearing to be deeply affected by the loss. While detained, the young men claimed they were devastated because they recognized the young girl, often seeing her in the Monsi family's shop, even though they never spoke to her. The police suspected that their presence at the funeral was not coincidental. Although their connection to Graziella's family was minimal, they might have been burdened by guilt and sought some form of redemption. Alternatively, they might have been attempting to monitor the investigation into their possible involvement in the crime. During the next round of interrogations, the suspects were questioned separately. Vincenzo and Giuseppe claimed they had an alibi, supported by the testimony of young Luda. They stated that they had been at the city's gaming club on the day Graziella disappeared. Meanwhile, Michele and Domenico refused to cooperate with the investigation, declined to answer questions, and demanded lawyers, which only heightened police suspicion. The detectives proceeded to verify Vincenzo and Giuseppe's alibi by visiting the gaming club. While their presence at the club was confirmed, they left after about an hour and were unable to account for their whereabouts afterward. As a result, investigators couldn't rule out their involvement in Graziella's torture. Unexpectedly, Michele and Domenico confessed to the crime, largely corroborating Pasquale's account. According to their confession, the group invited them to the forest that evening, saying they wanted to play with fire. When Michele and Domenico arrived, the others were already present. Pasquale was assigned to lure a victim and chose Graziella, a girl who, according to their friends, made him feel uneasy but seemed like an easy target. Pasquale later confirmed that he had discovered Graziella by the fountain while she was fetching water. He lured her by inviting her to see puppies that had recently been born in the nearby forest. Graziella, trusting and unsuspecting, did not imagine that this could lead to harm and agreed out of curiosity. Pasquale deceived and coaxed Graziella into following him. Since Graziella loved animals, she was eager to see the puppies, especially because Pasquale was someone she knew and trusted. She never expected such a cruel betrayal. The wooded area where the ambush was planned was nearby, about a 15 to 20-minute walk from where he first approached her. By then, her grandfather would have already begun searching for her. When they reached the location, Michele, Giuseppe, Domenico, and Vincenzo jumped out from their hiding spots. Graziella was terrified. In that moment, she likely realized she had been trapped, but it was too late. She had no way to defend herself. While mildly intoxicated, the perpetrators continued drinking and seemed to take amusement in Graziella's fear. According to their later confessions, they claimed they didn't plan to assault her but merely wanted to torment and mock her, taking advantage of her vulnerability. Graziella was so frightened that she went into a state of shock. During the incident, their group accidentally caused Graziella to fall and hit her head against a stone. Initially, the group claimed they did not plan to imprison her. Their intention was to restrain her to scare her further, but she collapsed and lost consciousness. Believing she was dead, they panicked, fearing that she was already being searched for. Likely due to alcohol intoxication clouding their judgment, they decided to destroy all evidence of what had occurred. They thought setting a fire would accomplish this. Some claims by the suspects were partially supported by evidence. For instance, the forensic examination did not conclusively reveal any signs of abuse. Graziella was discovered wearing underwear. The condition of the remains was poor due to severe burns, which made it impossible to confirm or rule out abuse. The Carabinieri suspected that fire might have destroyed evidence, as hoped by the group. At the time, Michele, Giuseppe, Domenico, and Vincenzo continued to insist that the incident had been accidental. The court finally decided the fate of the juvenile offenders. Vincenzo and Giuseppe confessed that they had gone to the forest because Pasquale invited them, unaware of what playing with fire meant. They claimed they were unwittingly drawn into something far more sinister. According to their testimony, they were horrified by what transpired and quickly left, not wanting to remain at the scene. However, they failed to realize that this dangerous situation would ultimately lead to police intervention. Their actions were driven by fear, either of the other participants or of the legal consequences they could face if accused of taking part. Despite inconsistencies in the group's accounts, the trial concluded with Pasquale Tortora receiving the lightest sentence, 30 years in prison. This was due to two key factors. First, he was the only member who cooperated voluntarily with the investigation. Second, despite extensive tests conducted by investigators, the evidence consistently showed that Pasquale was not the one who set Graziella's body on fire, although he actively participated in the abuse. Investigators concluded that the four criminals, Michele, Giuseppe, Domenico, and Vincenzo, were responsible for dumping the body, and they imposed severe punishment on them. Convicted of kidnapping, child abuse, and premeditated murder, they received life sentences in solitary confinement. This meant they would remain in prison for the rest of their lives without interaction with other inmates. During the reading of the verdict, Graziella's mother fainted and had to be assisted by her husband. At the same time, tensions erupted among the defendants' families, resulting in arguments. Graziella's relatives expressed satisfaction with the sentences, believing them to be justified, except in the case of Pasquale, who they felt had been punished too lightly for luring their child into the woods and sealing her tragic fate. The court's severe ruling angered Vincenzo and Giuseppe, both of whom maintained their innocence adamantly. Their fervent claims gained them some supporters who believed their protestations, but this did not lead to a successful appeal. 8 years later, Vincenzo Corratella, 27, ended his life, possibly out of despair or guilt over his actions. While in prison, he discreetly brought a rope cord into his cell and used it to end his life. Just days prior, his mother had visited him and continued to firmly believe in his innocence. However, he had already lost hope. On June 19, 2013, Michelle's lawyer requested a retrial, citing alleged judicial errors and opposing the verdict. The court, however, denied the request. Pasquale's mother publicly apologized to the Monsi family for her son's actions, expressing her belief that he should fully face the consequences of his crime. Despite this, Graziella's mother rejected the apology. She responded firmly, stating that Pasquale should experience the same pain their daughter had endured. She held the belief that if he had not led Graziella into the forest, their daughter would still be alive. As a result, Graziella's parents primarily blamed Pasquale for their loss. Graziella Monsi's name remains etched in memory across Italy. Near Castel del Monte, a small tombstone commemorates her, featuring her name, photograph, and a brief account of her tragically short life. Locals and tourists often leave flowers and toys at the site, though it is most frequently visited by Graziella's close family and friends. 24 years after the tragedy, Pasquale Tortora was released from prison. His original sentence was reduced by 6 years due to good behavior. Now 44 years old, he is attempting to rebuild his life, though it is uncertain whether he will succeed. Among the group involved in the crime, Pasquale was the only one tried through an abbreviated process, which led to a lighter punishment. Following the incident, the boys who were involved severed ties with each other. Their relationships remained fractured, even after Pasquale's release. He has expressed deep regret, stating that not a day passes without him reflecting on the harm he caused to Graziella and her family. Pasquale admits that, if given the chance to turn back time, he would never have committed the crime. Throughout his ordeal, his family provided crucial support, helping him endure that dark period and rebuild his life, a kindness for which he remains deeply grateful. Dasha, Graziella's mother, strongly objected to Pasquale's early release, claiming that it weakened the integrity of the law. She believes that individuals like him remain dangerous to society, are incapable of change, and should not be given second chances. Vincenzo and Giuseppe, both maintaining their innocence, questioned why Pasquale acted as he did. Vincenzo tragically died, leaving behind a suicide note in which he insisted on his innocence and expressed anger at the injustice he had endured. He entrusted evidence to a trusted person to support his claims in the future but lost the will to continue fighting for his freedom. Giuseppe, Domenico, and Michelle remain isolated. Giuseppe continues to proclaim his innocence, spending his days reading the Bible. He has accepted his sentence and is not pursuing an appeal but firmly believes he will eventually be released when his complete lack of involvement in the murder is proven. His lawyer and family share this belief, as did the late Vincenzo. All three insist that Pasquale masterminded the tragedy. They assert that he lured Graziella into the forest, tortured her, and was solely responsible for the crime. Their claims are backed by evidence. Only Pasquale's body showed signs of a struggle, such as scratches inflicted by Graziella. His clothes had dirt and her blood on them, while the others had no such traces. Despite this, Pasquale received the lightest sentence and has been released. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Troy LaFerrara. In 1994, in the tiny town of North Pole, Alaska, USA, Miranda was born. She had an older sister named Ashley, and both girls were raised by their mother, Elizabeth, a single parent. From the very beginning, their lives were not easy. At the age of 2, Miranda was diagnosed with congenital hip dysplasia. Because of this, from an early age she began to wear a special corrector so that she could be mobile naturally. It was difficult for her. Miranda was often perceived as an outcast with her mother. Everything was going badly. Elizabeth had problems with work. During this tough time, her brother-in-law, Richard, became a source of support. He was a serviceman and seemed like a decent person. He frequently visited her home, and he sometimes even looked after the children. However, as it later turned out, his intentions were much darker. When Miranda and Ashley turned 5 and 6 years old, respectively, Richard abused the girls. He convinced them not to tell anyone about what had happened. Only a few years later, the eldest daughter found the strength to overcome her fear and speak about the abuse. It was then that Elizabeth reported the matter to the police. When officers came to search Richard's house, they found a diary detailing all the abuse he had inflicted on the girls. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison but was released after just 6 years for good behavior. This was his first criminal offense, which contributed to his early release. By the time Miranda and Ashley turned 9 and 10 years old, respectively, they were grappling with the psychological trauma inflicted by Richard. When Elizabeth and her children learned that he would be released, it was a tremendous shock. They decided to move to another city. During this period, their situation worsened. Financial difficulties increased, and they felt betrayed by someone they had trusted. All of this became a significant burden. In their hometown, there was nothing that held them back. Living in proximity to such a threat was unbearable. Miranda hoped for a fresh start with the move, but it did not help her cope with the psychological trauma she had endured. By the age of 12, she began to exhibit rebellious behavior, associating with a group of older, dysfunctional teenagers. They engaged in substance abuse and excessive drinking. In her quest to fit in with this group, Miranda also began to indulge in these harmful behaviors. During this period, she met a man who was 24 years old at the time and had a bad reputation. Unfortunately, Miranda seemed to have always attracted such trouble. She became part of a group of teenagers with unconventional interests. They referred to themselves as a satanic group. Most people considered them gloomy and dangerous. Although Miranda wasn't an official member, she clearly participated in activities because of him, who persuaded her to join in some rituals, after which her soul seemingly belonged to him. When Miranda finally told her mother about what had happened, Elizabeth tried to sever all her daughter's ties with this unhealthy group. Unfortunately, this did not help. She began to run away frequently, developed an addiction to hard substances, and her school performance deteriorated significantly, as did her relationships with classmates. She became very aggressive and often instigated fights. The situation continued to worsen, and Elizabeth struggled with similar addictions. Miranda's biological father intervened. As far as is known, this was the only significant impact he had on her life. At his insistence, Miranda was placed in a clinic where she received help to combat the consequences of her experiences. She was prescribed medications and diagnosed with mental disorders. Unfortunately, this was of little help. According to people who were well acquainted with the dysfunctional family, by the age of 16, Miranda decided to drop out of school. At the same time, she immersed herself in wild parties with her troubled peers. She began a series of relationships with older men, one of whom got her pregnant. Although Miranda decided to keep the child, she didn't even know who the biological father was. After that, Elizabeth asked her to terminate the pregnancy. Meanwhile, relations with her family deteriorated to an extreme point. Ashley could no longer watch her mother and sister turn into addicts. She felt forced to leave home, resulting in Miranda losing her only support. By this time, after Elizabeth's overdose, social services decided to take Miranda away from Elizabeth. She is destined to be in a new family in a small town called Dan in North Carolina. It was here that Miranda met a 20-year-old man named Alit Barber. By this time, Miranda was 17, and Alit was engaged to a girl who was expecting a child with him. This girl later turned out to be another underage student. A love triangle formed around Alit, who had 2 pregnant girls at once. The children were born about a month and a half apart. Now, the group had 2 newborns that needed care. However, all of them are not mature enough to take on the responsibilities of being parents. A few months after the children's birth, Alit's own daughter was hospitalized due to an overdose of sedatives. The behavior of the biological father had always been problematic, and from that moment, it only deteriorated further. His relationship with his fiancée began to suffer, and she ultimately decided to break up with him, leaving with the child for another city. This led to Alit and Miranda being together, forming a full-fledged couple, raising little Arya together. During this time, Miranda willingly talked about her difficult past, and Alit became intrigued as they discussed her experiences with the satanic cult. About a year into their relationship, they decided to leave North Carolina, as their families did not approve of their lifestyle. This escape was necessary to distance themselves from constant conflicts and the supervision of the older generation. Thus, a series of moves began for the young family. They struggled to settle down anywhere for long due to employment difficulties, until they finally reached a suburb in Pennsylvania called Port Trevorton, where only about 400 people lived at that time. They had neither money nor work to establish a foothold. However, Alit had a friend in the area who helped them by providing a place to stay. They were essentially marginalized individuals, making it challenging for them to find regular employment, as they were quite unsociable, which led to difficulties with social interactions. On October 22, Miranda, in her search for income, decided to offer herself as an escort service. She emphasized in her advertisement that she was not willing to provide intimate services but was available for companionship and to accompany men to various events. Outwardly, she seemed quite pleasant, and she met several men for $80, engaging in conversations but without intimate contact. It is difficult to say for sure whether she truly adhered to the boundaries she set. In one such encounter, she met a man named Troy LaFerrara, a 42-year-old married man who had been a decent family man and church member for decades. Upon seeing Miranda's advertisement, he became immediately interested. When he called Miranda, he offered a different type of service, not just companionship, which angered her. She refused his proposal, pointing out what she had written in her ad. After some time, however, disturbing thoughts began to plague her mind. Miranda and Alit realized they were dealing with a rather wealthy man since he had made a very generous financial offer. After discussing it, they recognized that this could be a potential way to alleviate their financial struggles. Although they had not previously fantasized about such desires, the allure of crime as a solution to their financial difficulties excited both Alit and Miranda greatly. At the beginning of their relationship, Alit and Miranda immediately developed a common interest in satanic themes. Their conversations were often filled with dark imagery, including mentions of blood. They did not plan to kill a specific person, however. They would often end such discussions with thoughts of finding a victim and experiencing what it was like to take a person's life. When Troy made his generous offer, Miranda calmed down after the unsettling proposal and began discussing the situation with Alit. Troy lived in another city, and their correspondence took place via the internet, which could easily be deleted along with the removal of profiles. They were not connected in any way in real life, making him an ideal target for murder. They realized they could make good money and fulfill their long-standing dream. A couple of hours later, Miranda agreed to Troy's offer and messaged for him. They agreed to meet in a parking lot of a supermarket on the outskirts of the city, where Miranda would be in her car. Miranda suggested going to a neighboring suburb, claiming it was her summer house that she used for work. Naturally, she did not take the initiative alone. Her boyfriend was supposed to be in the back seat of the car to help her bring her dark fantasy to life. Their plan involved disguising tools and a blanket in the car. The plan stipulated that Miranda would say a code phrase, after which Alit would attack the victim. The meeting was scheduled for November 11, 2013, a date chosen deliberately because it turned out to be Alit's birthday. At the appointed hour, the Honda CR-V was waiting for Troy in the shopping center parking lot. Upon entering the vehicle, he immediately paid Miranda the agreed amount. They drove to a neighboring town, also small and provincial. However, instead of taking him to the house they had discussed, Miranda drove to a secluded spot on a quiet, deserted street in a forested area. She stopped the car and said the code phrase, after which Alit began to strangle Troy with a wire. However, they underestimated their victim's strength. Troy turned out to be quite a powerful man, managing to open the door and even pull one leg out onto the street. Alit quickly weakened. Miranda grew nervous because everything was supposed to have ended long ago, yet it did not go according to plan. They did not expect such resistance. The worst part was that Miranda saw headlights approaching in the rearview mirror, which made her realize they could be caught. She took out the knives they had prepared for a bloody massacre, began to stab Troy multiple times in the chest, neck, face, and stomach. When Troy stopped struggling, ceased showing signs of life, Elliot got out of the car, put his leg inside, and closed the door from the outside. He then resumed his position in the back seat, and they fled the scene. They drove to another isolated area in the suburbs, where they stripped Troy of his wallet, expensive watch, jewelry, and anything else they could find, except for his mobile phone. Elliot insisted they leave the phone behind, fearing they could be tracked by geolocation. They disposed of Troy's body by the side of the road and drove away, convinced they had committed the perfect crime. Miranda and Elliot stopped at the nearest Walmart to purchase cleaning agents to tidy up the car interior. They bought special compounds for the seats and mats, as well as a set of gloves for their cleaning efforts. The front of the car was covered in blood, and cleaning it thoroughly took them several hours. They went to another secluded location to wash away the blood. Afterward, they decided to celebrate Elliot's birthday. They went to a restaurant and then to a strip club, using the money stolen from their victim. Elliot and Miranda simply continued living their lives as if nothing had happened. The next day, a couple of random witnesses stumbled upon Troy's body, which was not even covered with branches or dirt. The man had been carelessly discarded like trash, with 20 stab wounds and marks of strangulation on his neck. Naturally, witnesses immediately called the police. When law enforcement arrived, they discovered not only the body but also the cord from the electrical device used for strangulation. The body was identifiable because a mobile phone remained in the victim's pocket. The police checked the call history and found that on November 11th, he had contacted only 2 numbers, his wife and 1 unsaved number. After investigating the unsaved number, the police traced it back to Miranda and obtained her details, including her residence. She immediately piqued the investigators' interest. Within minutes, the police were on their way to her house. Miranda was detained and taken to the station for questioning. From the very beginning, the story unfolded. Miranda denied any involvement in the crime and claimed not to know the victim. Nevertheless, it was obvious that she was nervous and acting suspiciously. It was enough for the detectives to ask for her mobile phone for her testimony to begin to change. At first, she vehemently refused to provide her mobile phone, but as the detectives examined the contents of her correspondence and contacts, Miranda grew more and more anxious. Despite their efforts, they were unable to find the necessary information immediately. Miranda had nothing to present, and so they simply let her go. When Miranda returned home, something changed within her. She began to confide in the first person she met, her friend, about the murder. However, she did this so abruptly that it seemed awkward from the very start. The young man tried to convince Miranda that she should return to the police and confess everything. Her husband, Elliot, joined the conversation and acted shocked by the story. Miranda clearly felt remorse. She confessed to her friend that she had stabbed the victim with a knife, but she did not mention Elliot at all. Throughout the conversation, her husband never confessed to even being present in the car. Even the friend got the impression that he was manipulating Miranda, trying to impose a greater sense of guilt on her, which seemed strange. Instead of taking any part of the blame, Elliot feigned shock and even began to cry. The friend did not suspect Elliot could be involved in the crime. On the contrary, he believed Elliot to be innocent. Miranda struggled with her thoughts most of the night. Finally, around 4 a.m., she gathered her strength and returned to the police station, where she recounted the murder, insisting that it had been self-defense. She confessed that she had agreed to meet Troy but not to provide intimate services. She had only intended to escort him. However, when Troy insisted on paying for intimate, Miranda informed him that she was only 16, which seemed to unsettle him. She claimed he would face criminal prosecution if she reported him to the police. This was a lie, as she had just turned 19. Miranda was clearly trying to shift some of the blame onto the victim to justify her actions. According to her, instead of backing off, Troy began to force her to have intimate. When he realized she was not going to comply, he became aggressive, and she felt that her life was threatened. Recalling her childhood experiences with her Uncle Richard, she claimed to have defended herself. However, Miranda's words sounded implausible, the 20 stab wounds she inflicted, which did not resemble defensive wounds. Moreover, a cord was found with which Troy had been strangled, leaving a mark on his neck that contradicted Miranda's account. It appeared that a third party had been involved. To verify her claims, the police began tracking movements before the meeting. They quickly found surveillance footage filmed in the parking lot just 5 minutes before the scheduled encounter. The recording showed an unknown young man hiding in the back seat of the car, who was soon identified as 22-year-old Elliot, Miranda's husband. It was decided to question him. The criminals clearly had not thought through their plan, as they lacked a coherent version of events. As a result, Elliot provided a version that was completely different from Miranda's account. Detectives immediately noted that while Miranda was very emotional, Elliot showed no feelings. He was cold but surprisingly quick to talk, as if he had long wanted to discuss the crime. While describing the attack, Elliot spent much more time discussing the purchases made with the stolen money, including a detailed account of the food they had eaten on his birthday. His lack of concern about the murder was unsettling. After this, Elliot and Miranda were arrested and remained in custody until the hearing. However, by that day, both had retracted their statements, now claiming their innocence. This contradicted what Miranda had said during a television interview shortly before the hearing began, where several journalists had spoken to her. Miranda participated in a viral interview, stating that this was not her first experience with such circumstances, and claimed she had stopped counting the victims after reaching the 22nd murder from 2008 to 2013. However, all this seemed absurd. The family spoke out in defense of Miranda, and everyone who knew her well insisted that she had lied her entire life. The reasons for her actions were always the same: Miranda just wanted to draw attention to herself and enjoyed it. Despite this, she insisted that all the murders began when she became a member of a Satanist group in her teens. Miranda avoided details and did not even know the names of the victims, yet she persistently called herself a serial killer. She claimed that her group only killed those who committed bad deeds, for which she was nicknamed Dextrin. During her conversations, she was unable to provide details about these episodes, of which she claimed there were many more. She mentioned living in Alaska during this period, where there were reportedly many missing people. It seemed that all this was a blatant lie. Additionally, her behavior clearly did not align with that of an experienced criminal. She even left the victim's mobile phone right in his pocket without hiding or destroying it. Troy LaFerrara was actually the first victim. During the investigation, it turned out that 2 more men had responded to Miranda's ad, but they did not come, thus saving their lives. However, there were opposing opinions. Psychologists worked extensively with her, and some were convinced that she had killed people before. She frequently talked about her life, including all these alleged ritual murders, and recounting these stories was one of her favorite activities during their relationship. She spoke eloquently about these stories, although she refused to repeat them to journalists, claiming it was to protect the other participants in the murders. Her friends thought she was possessed, while others in the prosecutor's office believed the criminals were trying to avoid the death penalty by claiming insanity. All this was very difficult to prove or disprove, given the numerous statements from the detainees. Before the hearing began in 2016, everything was still uncertain. However, other upheavals occurred. The mother of Miranda voluntarily took her own life. She could not cope with the public pressure of being accused of raising a monster. By that time, she had been struggling with addiction and mental health issues for many years, and her relatives believed she simply could not manage them. She did not leave a suicide note, so it is not known for certain how much influence her daughter had on this decision. Many believe that the public pressure surrounding Miranda was the last straw. That same year, while in prison, Miranda asked for a divorce from her husband. She continued to insist that she was a victim from the day she was born, claiming she was surrounded by manipulators, liars, and criminals. One day, she recounted how she was tied to a bed and had an abortion at home. This happened after she told her mother she was pregnant but did not know by whom. Her ex-boyfriend allegedly forced her into prostitution from the age of 12. However, it is difficult to determine which, if any, of these claims were true. Despite being diagnosed with several abnormalities in the hospital, it remains uncertain whether she ever took medication for conditions such as attention deficit disorder, schizophrenia, or bipolar disorder. Feeling the attention and interest of the public, Miranda continued to spin one tale after another. Now she remembered the name of a boy, whom she claimed was killed in another ritual. She then stated that she voluntarily went to the police because she wanted to be arrested to finally stop killing. Elite and Miranda were found guilty. However, there were difficulties in determining the punishment due to their young age. The prosecutor's office fought in vain for the death penalty but was unsuccessful, largely due to organizations advocating for the abolition of the death penalty. As a result, in September 2014, they were sentenced to life imprisonment. Aria fell under the jurisdiction of Child Protective Services. Given how public the scandal was, the little girl's name was changed, and she was placed in a foster family. Most of all, the murder shocked Troy LaFerrara's wife. She had no idea her husband was living a double life, and she was even more shocked by the tragic ending. The case of Troy LaFerrara stands as a somber testament to the destructive power of unresolved trauma, the allure of darkness, and the fragility of human lives caught in the crosshairs of desperation and choice. This narrative is more than a recounting of a crime. It is a profound exploration of how personal pain, toxic relationships, and societal neglect can coalesce into an act of irreversible violence, leaving a trail of devastation that echoes far beyond its immediate victims. Miranda's journey from a vulnerable child to a convicted killer is a harrowing descent marked by pivotal moments of suffering and rebellion. Diagnosed with a physical disability at age 2, her early years were shaped by the struggle for mobility and the isolation it bred. The abuse she and Ashley endured at 5 and 6, respectively, from Richard, a trusted family figure whose dark intentions were later exposed in his diary, planted seeds of trauma that would grow unchecked. Troy LaFerrara, a church-going husband and father, entered this story as an unlikely victim, drawn by Miranda's online ad for companionship in October 2013. His offer of payment for more than she advertised sparked a plan born of financial need and dark fantasy. This was not a crime of passion but a calculated act, driven by greed and a perverse desire to experience murder, rooted in the satanic themes that had long captivated their conversations. The story of Troy LaFerrara is a mirror to society's failures and humanity's capacity for darkness, a call to confront the roots of violence, trauma, isolation, and the allure of destructive bonds, while mourning the lives it claims. For Miranda, it is a life sentence that began long before prison, a confinement rooted in a childhood stolen by abuse and an adulthood lost to her own choices. For Elite, it is the end of a path paved by recklessness and a chilling lack of remorse. For the rest of us, it is a plea to see the unseen, to intervene before despair turns deadly, and to honor the sanctity of every life, however flawed, that crosses our path. In the quiet of Port Trevorton, Troy's memory endures as a silent witness to a tragedy that need not have been, a life extinguished by two souls who chose darkness over light, leaving only questions and sorrow in their wake. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Jasmine Pace. Jasmine Pace, a 22-year-old college student, planned to spend Thanksgiving 2022 with her family. However, her plans suddenly changed, leaving her mother surprised. At the last moment, she sent a message canceling the family gathering. Shortly afterward, a new post appeared on Jasmine's Facebook page that read, "Enjoy Thanksgiving with my baby," accompanied by a photo that raised concerns. Initially confused, her family's concern quickly escalated into panic when they realized something was wrong. Jasmine was missing, and someone seemed to be impersonating her online. On the night of November 22, 2022, Jasmine drove a white Chevy Equinox away from her home in Chattanooga, Tennessee, at approximately 11:30 p.m. Later, her mother, Katrina Bean, received a text from Jasmine's phone stating that she would spend the rest of the week at her friend Emma's house. Since Jasmine was grieving the recent loss of her grandmother to cancer, her decision to skip the family gathering didn't immediately alarm her loved ones. She often withdrew for short periods to cope with her emotions. But everything took a troubling turn when Jasmine made a Facebook post. The post featured Jasmine in an uncharacteristically revealing outfit, which surprised her mother. What alarmed her father, Travis Pace, was even more troubling. Jasmine's extensive tattoos were missing from the photo. Each tattoo represented a timeline in her life, added months apart, creating a distinctive pattern, especially on her right arm. The glaring absence of these tattoos confirmed the post was fake, and Jasmine's family realized the situation was far worse than they had imagined. Katrina reached out to Jasmine's friend Emma and confirmed what she had suspected. Jasmine had been missing from her family for a week, contradicting the claims in a recent message. Several other friends and family members had also received suspicious messages supposedly from Jasmine, all of which raised concerns. The family immediately began searching for her. Jasmine's SUV, equipped with a GPS feature from the My Chevrolet app, allowed her mother to track its location. The car was found parked outside a building on Mountain Creek Road in Chattanooga. By the time it was discovered, it was 8:30 p.m. on November 26th, 4 days after Jasmine was last seen leaving her mother's house late on the evening of the 22nd. The area where the car was located was unfamiliar to the family, and as far as they knew, Jasmine didn't know anyone there. When they approached the car, they noticed that the driver's seat was pushed far back, suggesting that someone much taller than the petite Jasmine had been driving. The family contacted the police, who arrived on the scene and filed a report describing the situation. Katrina also reached out to the family's cell phone provider. Since Jasmine was part of their family plan, her mother, Katrina, had access to her phone records. The records revealed that there had been no calls from Jasmine's phone for several days. In the presence of the police, Katrina began calling the numbers listed in the call log. One number stood out, a call with someone Jasmine had spoken to for over an hour on the night of the 22nd. When Katrina dialed that number, it connected to a young man named Jason, whom Jasmine had recently met on a dating app. Jason, a computer science student at a university in Chattanooga, had been casually dating Jasmine for a few months. Their relationship was not serious, so Jasmine never introduced him to her parents, Katrina and Travis, who didn't know him. When Jasmine was reported missing, Jason claimed he hadn't heard from her in several days and that their last conversation had been brief. However, Katrina found his behavior suspicious and felt he might be lying. His apparent lack of concern further alarmed her. Despite Katrina urging the police to dig deeper, they refused, arguing that Jasmine was an adult and there was no clear evidence of foul play. Determined to find their daughter, Katrina and Travis began knocking on doors throughout the apartment complex on Mountain Creek Road. Unfortunately, no neighbors had seen Jasmine. They sought help from the apartment guard, who provided security camera footage. The video showed a white Chevrolet entering the parking lot. By cross-referencing this footage with timestamps from the My Chevrolet app, they pinpointed the general time frame but couldn't identify the driver. Katrina then noticed an unread text message from Jasmine, sent on November 23rd. The message included a location and timestamp, showing Jasmine's device had been at a specific place at 2:18 a.m. This was highly unusual, as Jasmine had never sent such cryptic messages, especially during the night. Acting quickly, Katrina and Travis went straight to the address mentioned in the message. Jasmine's parents, Katrina and Travis, knocked on every door in the building, paying particular attention to room 210. Neighbors mentioned hearing a loud noise from that unit around 2:15 a.m. on November 23rd. Upon investigation, Katrina and Travis quickly discovered that the tenant of the apartment was Jason. The unit was quite small, consisting of a kitchenette near the sofa, a hallway leading to the bedroom, and a single bathroom. From the front door, they could see a small duffel bag filled with cleaning supplies sitting on the kitchen table. While searching, Travis found Jasmine's driver's license and credit cards in a drawer. They called the police again, but after speaking with Katrina and the neighbors, the officers left, citing a lack of immediate evidence of foul play. Frustrated by the lack of action, Katrina went back to the apartment several times over the next few hours. She collected items like laptops, electronics, cell phones, a camera, and an iPad, anything that might offer clues to her daughter's whereabouts. She and Travis also searched the trash cans outside the building. Nearly at midnight, the police finally returned to room 210 with a search warrant and officially began their investigation. During the inspection, they observed suspicious stains resembling blood in multiple areas, on the wooden floor in the living room, the linoleum in the bathroom, and the carpet in the bedroom. They also discovered blood stains on the bathroom doors and walls. The substantial amount of cleaning supplies found in the apartment further heightened suspicions. At the scene, police seized a pair of white sneakers and blue pants for further investigation. In the living room, broken glass fragments hinted at a possible violent altercation. In the bedroom, the furniture appeared to have been moved, suggesting attempts to conceal signs of a struggle. This discovery led investigators to focus more intently on piecing together the unsettling clues surrounding Jasmine's disappearance. In some parts of the apartment, it was evident that furniture had been rearranged to hide evidence. A kitchen knife was found on the bed, and stains that could potentially be blood were present in nearly every room. A forensic team was brought in to apply a specialized solution designed to detect traces of blood. The investigation shifted from a missing persons case to a murder inquiry. Detectives obtained CCTV footage from the apartment building and nearby areas to construct a timeline of Jason Chen's movements, hoping it would lead to locating Jasmine Pace. Investigators confirmed that Jasmine arrived at 110 Tremont before midnight on November 22. Her Chevrolet was seen entering the building's parking lot and later leaving, with investigators tracking the vehicle to the apartment complex where Jason lived. The day after her arrival, Jasmine was recorded leaving the building, wearing a hoodie. A surveillance camera at the apartment's entrance captured Jason leaving multiple times, including at 7:30 p.m. Just 3 minutes later, someone in a light-colored sweatshirt was seen driving Jasmine's SUV to the Signal View condo, where the vehicle was abandoned. On November 23, 2022, Jason took several suspicious trips. In the morning, he went to Walmart and purchased hydrogen peroxide, cleaning supplies, and a pair of white sneakers, which were clearly visible on the store's surveillance footage. These sneakers were later found discarded in a trash can near the apartment complex. That evening, Jason visited Ukraine to buy a pack of paper towels. Between the Walmart trip and disposing of some clothes, investigators believe Jason was attempting to conceal evidence. His movements were monitored through various surveillance videos across Chattanooga, where his distinctive white sweatshirt made him easily identifiable even in blurry footage. Around 6 p.m. on the 23rd, a man in a white sweatshirt was filmed struggling to move a large suitcase from the apartment entrance to the parking lot. Shortly afterward, Jason's black Toyota Camry was seen driving away. On November 29th, a week after Jasmine's disappearance, Jason was found at his parents' home. The arresting officers in Nolanville observed cuts on Jason's arms and legs, suggesting a violent encounter. A search warrant was issued for the home, resulting in the seizure of a black backpack and handwritten notes from the room Jason had been staying in. The notes appeared to show him trying to construct his version of the incident. Detectives discovered Jason had last seen Jasmine on November 19th, according to notes he made. He claimed they had spoken and mentioned that Jasmine struggled with mental health issues. Jason seemingly prepared for his eventual questioning by portraying Jasmine as homeless. During a search of Jason's backpack, detectives found his phone and a SIM card removed from Jasmine's phone. Upon examining Jason's phone, investigators recovered a photo of Jasmine standing in his bathroom on the night she disappeared. They also found screenshots of text messages from Jasmine, though the content of the messages was missing. The morning following Jasmine's apparent death, Jason sent her a photo captioned, "Slept like a baby," followed by a text later that day saying, "We'll meet again tonight." Metadata revealed the photo had been taken 2 years earlier. Jasmine's phone records showed she visited Walmart with Jason on the morning she disappeared, but surveillance footage only captured Jason shopping alone. Investigators traced Jason's movements, revealing that he loaded a large suitcase into his Toyota Camry and drove to Suck Creek Road near the riverbank. On December 1st, Thursday, investigators found a suitcase along the riverbank. It belonged to Jason and contained Jasmine's body. She was wrapped in 3 garbage bags and restrained with handcuffs. Her right hand was cuffed to her right ankle, while her left ankle was cuffed to her right elbow. The handcuffs were basic models, not police issue, with one chain broken. An autopsy confirmed Jasmine had been fatally attacked, with the bullet concentrated in a single area of her body. In December 2022, Jason Chen's bail was set at $5 million, sparking outrage due to the disturbing details of Jasmine's murder. Many believed he shouldn't have been offered bail at all. Evidence revealed that Jason had accessed Jasmine's phone and SIM card to manage her bank account and post fake messages after her death. During his opening statement on the first day of court proceedings, lawyer Josh Weiss did not claim his client's innocence. He acknowledged that Jason killed Jasmine but argued that it was unintentional. The prosecution did not pursue the death penalty. If convicted of first-degree murder, Jason faces life in prison without the possibility of parole. His best chance for a lighter sentence would be to plead to a lesser charge, such as manslaughter. To do this, the defense aimed to convince the jury that Jason killed Jasmine in a moment of passion, having been provoked into an extreme emotional reaction that resulted in her death. The defense's argument suggested that they had been drinking wine late at night at Jason's home, and that Jasmine had gone to the kitchen to get water. While there, she allegedly heard constant notifications from a dating app on Jason's phone. This led to an argument between the two, during which Jasmine reportedly attacked Jason with a broken wine glass. Jason, who had earlier taken a kitchen knife to his bedroom to open a bottle of wine, used the knife during the struggle. The defense explained the stains on Jasmine's body as part of an incident that occurred after the attack. They claimed Jason panicked after the attack and handcuffed Jasmine to fit her into a suitcase. Video recordings from Jason and Jasmine's phones, along with testimony from neighbors, provided a timeline of the murder and Jason's attempts to cover it up. Neighbor Courtney Brewer testified to hearing an argument after 2 a.m. The reconstruction of the murder relied heavily on the physical evidence found at the crime scene, but this is where the case became complicated. Police applied a chemical to various items at the crime scene, including a broken knife. Katrina inspected and searched the crime scene. The defense later called its expert to highlight significant changes observed between the initial police response and the scene's documentation. Furniture had been moved, and questions arose about whether certain items were relevant evidence. Travis testified that, when he initially entered the room with Katrina to find their daughter, he didn't see a knife on the bed. The medical examiner determined the attack was deliberate and found no suspicious evidence contradicting this conclusion. Based on the location of the wounds, Jasmine was likely in a fetal position during the assault. The handcuffs she wore were most likely applied while she was still alive. Additionally, the medical examiner found no alcohol in her system, which contradicted Jason's claim that they had been drinking wine. Jason's argument that Jasmine provoked him by becoming angry over dating app notifications was proven false. A state expert reviewed the app's data and confirmed no notifications were received. Jason chose not to testify in his defense. Evidence was presented quickly. Jason's lawyer withdrew support for his initial story, instead highlighting the absence of handcuff marks on Jasmine's wrists, which would have been visible if she had been alive when restrained. The presence of handcuffs suggested that the attack was premeditated. The number of wounds indicated that Jason had sufficient time to think through and carry out the assault. During closing arguments, prosecutor Cody Vamp outlined the sequence of events, including Courtney Brewer hearing someone running to the apartment door at 2 a.m. The jury began deliberating after the final arguments and delivered a verdict shortly afterward. One juror confirmed that the repeated visits by Jasmine Pace's family to the crime scene did not influence their decision. At the sentencing phase, jurors had to decide whether Jason Chen should ever be eligible for parole. Jason's attorney appealed to the jury, asking them to grant his client a chance for redemption. However, the jury deliberated for less than an hour and ultimately convicted Jason Chen of first-degree murder, sentencing him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Following the conviction, Jasmine Pace's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Jason Chen's parents. They accused the parents of harboring Jason, giving him money, and sharing information during the days after the murder while he was the prime suspect and their daughter was still missing. The loss of Jasmine and the ensuing legal battles deeply affected the Pace family. After the sentencing, the trials surrounding Jason Chen, referred to by the family as a monster, were marked by overwhelming grief. Prosecutors condemned his crime as heinous, cruel, and inhumane.